It's episode 205 of the Look at Warhammer podcast, and me and Phil are talking about Heresy, aren't we, Phil?
Ooh, we are.
What a treat indeed. So, if you didn't know, because, you're the kind of person who doesn't pay attention to this sort of stuff, Warhammer, the Horus Heresy, a popular series of Warhammer-related fiction, has been enjoying gaming status for many years now. Once a faraway, distant prospect, today made manifest through various miniatures, games, novels, and Lord knows what else. They have decided that it is time, because, it is 3 years hence since the last edition of Horus Heresy, that they gift us, Phil, with another edition of Heresy. Woo! Very exciting, eh?
Yay, sort of. Maybe not. I don't know. Probably the thing no one wanted, but we've got new models.
We have got new models, demonstrated to us through the drop site preview, a reference, I suppose, to the events of the drop site massacre, although none of the armies nor armor types were apparently all that present at the events of the drop site massacre, but nonetheless, I'm sure maybe a few of the Mark IIs were floating around, but certainly not the fancy new Saturnine armor, although maybe with the benefit of, timey-wimey, it was always there, we just forgot to mention it type storytelling.
Yes, I think this is a case of jumbo retcons where, much like, with Imperial Knights, things like that, these things have always been here, but we just never noticed in all the other editions of the game, which is, I don't know, is its own problem, and we've complained about sort of retcons before. I think these ones aren't necessarily as bad, because if you're a historian of Games Workshop in any form, you would have known that the Saturnine armor did exist very briefly as one of, I think, the 3 original Terminator designs that were done. And obviously they went for the look that was more Indomitus Terminator armor, or that's what it later became. And then there's been artwork of it floating around for years. So it's slightly different from the more controversial retcon, which was female custodes. Not that I want to bang on about that, but in that one, throughout the lore, it was very explicitly custodes came from men. So the new law is deliberately contradicting the pre-established stuff. So that's a different kind of retcon to this one, which is more, you hadn't heard about it before, and now you have. There was never law that said there was no such thing as Saturnine armor. So it's almost like the absence of law, and now it's just being inserted in, which does, it makes for an interesting thing when all the books are written. So if you are specifically thinking, sorry, I'm going on a big rant here. If you're looking at the Black Library books, for example, there would have been probably no mention of Saturnine armor whatsoever. So to then insert it into the Istvan massacre as it was a thing here and all legions had it, it's a bit of it's a bit of a stretch for a lot of people, I would imagine, to get there.
I agree. I think ultimately, in many respects, I view it the same as any of the other kind of retcons that they do. I think it is as, bad or good. Ultimately, I'm completely fine with Games Workshop rewriting their background and fluff to suit their commercial aims, but I do also acknowledge that it always feels a little bit ham-fisted sometimes, and I think when you are layering new things into such a well-refined and defined, I suppose, piece of fiction such as the Heresy, it is always interesting. But look, at the end of the day, Space Marines sell. They sell real well, and new Space Marine minis are, short in supply when it comes to at least original ideas. Obviously not in terms of numeracy. There are more Space Marine miniatures coming out every year than you can shake various sticks at. But when it comes to kind of original concepts, as opposed to just sort of going, it's a Space Marine, but with a different type of hat, this is, at least a new armor type. And they get 2 new armor types, because again, Mark II had been present in the old plastic Heresy kits. So if you had picked up any of the vehicles, the accessory sprues, the kind of crew sprues came with Mark II people within the Rhinos or the Predators or whatever it may be. So the geezer popping up from up top to shoot out of a Rhino would typically be in a Mark II plate, unless obviously you as the modeler took lengths to head swap or do what was necessary to represent it in the armor of your favorite. But yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, am I surprised that GW has kind of done this? No, not at all, because at the end of the day, it's a pretty well-established pattern of behavior from them. But at the same time, I'm curious how necessary it was to add Saturnine. But at the end of the day, a lot of people seem quite excited about the miniatures and what they look like. I'm a little bit marmitey with them at the moment, and so much as I think there's bits about them I kind of love and bits about them I sort of hate, but at the same time, I think it all kind of meshes out as a kind of general positive from me. I'd be really interested to see the scale of them. I know, obviously, as photographed, you can get a vibe for how big they are, but I think, again, nothing quite compares to when you see them in reality. So I'd like to see what they look like in the plastic. But innately, I'm not initially a hater of the Saturnine stuff. I just feel like I kind of see it for what it is, which is a bit of a cynical cash grab from GW to try and basically capture a very niche audience of people on the internet who have become infatuated with the idea of there being this obscure armor set and wanting to kind of bring it to life on the tabletop. So,
yeah, I think that has been the case for a while. There have been like third-party companies that sort of make and sell their own Saturnine inspired armor or just blatant knockoffs.
And we can't have that, Phil. We can't have that.
I think that's what Games Workshop's attitude is. If they see something that is remotely possible as a niche that they could be making money off of, they're going to try and corner that market. So, speculatively, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Thunder Warriors at some point, just because, like myself, there are people that convert and like Thunder Warriors as models. So I can see Games Workshop wanting a piece of that small pie. So I'm sure it will happen at some point. Yeah, for me, the Saturnine armor, I'm not a huge fan of it. It looks a bit overdone and silly. And I mean, I constantly say it word, I should try and stop. But these ones, they to me, they don't look like Warhammer models. These are the ones that most look like they're from another game system entirely. And they look more like chunky toys than miniature figurines. And, this is me just having seen them online, haven't seen them in person. Maybe my opinions will change. In the article that we're looking through when it comes to the Saturnine Dreadnought, there's one where they're painted as a Space Wolf, so it's all in grey. And actually that one, I think, looks a lot better, just because it's just more like one colour, whereas I think with the Salamanders with the sort of the flaming shoulder pauldrons is just a bit too much. So I think once we see these in person and once, hobby community gets to them and does their own schemes, I think it will be a positive for these marks of armor. The one interesting thing I was trying to look at, because we've seen it before where the Heresy team does quite a good job at like revisionist history, where they sort of reverse engineer something so you can see where it maybe came from. And I was thinking, do these look at all like they're meant to then go on to become Centurions? Because the way the Centurions hold the weapons look a bit similar to how they hold them here. And the sort of the belly armor does look a bit similar to the belly armor of the Gravis in terms of that kind of layered plating. But other than that, it doesn't really look like it. And normally the Heresy team do a good job of making this thing look like it's gone on to become something else. So in a way, the paradox that they have created is like, cool, there's this armor, but then where does it go in 40k? It's just disappeared completely, I guess. Or it's so old, because from the lore that they've explained is it was super old technology. Then Vulcan has sort of recreated it and then gave it to everyone. So it's sort of prevalent and more commonplace, although, albeit, I guess, super elite, right? But it's not rare. In a way, if it was like the lost technology, that would almost be more in keeping with the fact that we haven't heard about it at all until now. So, yeah, maybe how they've inserted it into the lore isn't perhaps the best.
Yeah, I mean, they got a habit of that, right? Like, I think a lot of the time, again, people who know that GW's kind of design philosophy when it comes to product releases is to lead with the design studios. Now, the specialist game studio may operate differently from the kind of core GW approach, but I don't think that's actually the case. I think they still kind of operate in a similar kind of fashion, although maybe I'm wrong about that. And, potentially if I am, then fair enough. But I think, ultimately, a lot of the time it feels that GW at the moment, the miniature designers create miniatures and then the rules writers / lore kind of custodians have very limited opportunities to kind of figure out where this stuff fits. So, when the designers probably have a period of years to iterate and develop these ideas, the people who kind of protect the, fiction, the lore, the fluff, get maybe a rather less amount of time to implement. So you end up with things like, well, how the heck are we going to get these in there? Vulcan did it. He's got a hammer. He's good at crafting and forging things, presumably. Let's just go with that. It'll be fine. And again, fair enough. That's what they've done. And the implication is that he did this prior to half the legions, turning treacherous. So there is an equal spread of it all around, because he did this prior to everyone going a bit wibbly, seems to be the implication.
Yeah, at least from what we know now, and it'd be interesting to see, because there are, I assume there's going to be no new Black Library novels talking about the Heresy, because that is done, right? Yeah. So the only lore that we would, in theory, get would be from the whatever books that they produce in terms of rule books, right? The black books of old, which we may get a similar thing this edition. They sort of attempted it in the last edition with the campaign books. So yeah, I guess through that we will have stories and lore for this armor in particular. And it's easy to besmirch the idea of inserting new things as retcons and being done badly. But ultimately, as a Heresy player, they were always producing new, sort of technically new stuff, but stuff that always existed, maybe potentially in the lore. But, they've got to create new models. So the idea of not the Destroyer Marines, but the ones with all the super lethal
yeah, they were
weapons.
They are Destroyer squads, yeah.
Was it Destroyer squads?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they are
something like that. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure when Heresy first dropped, that wasn't a thing, but eventually that got introduced into either the story via the Black Library or the Black Books, and it felt much more seamless. Whereas now, because it's in a way because the Heresy wasn't that established when it first started, adding in new stuff just felt like part and parcel, whereas now it feels like it's very established, so inserting new stuff feels like a much bigger shift and much bigger change, and is rocking the boat, basically.
Well, I feel like before, when Black Library, and more specifically the old Forge World team, were creating things, they were effectively looking at the Legion forces and trying to, come up with army kind of constructs, and credit where credit's due to Alan Blythe as a rules creator, but also a world builder. he was an individual who really dived deep into kind of the minutia, the kind of fabric of these ideas, and really started to note the idea of like, well, we know from the established range in Warhammer 40,000 that there are assault marines, there are bikes, there are tanks, there are, tactical squads. But these are modern constructs in the way that they operate, whereas in the Legion days, when they would have had a great many more Marines operating, very different kind of tactics, I think the idea was that, these squads became very particular in their purpose. So the idea is they became singular. So you ended up with destroyer squads because they were there specifically to do heavy weapons fire. You had more the kind of specialist weapon support squads that all had plasma guns, all had flamers, all had whatever, because they performed that sort of function. And I think he created those ideas and established them very early on within the Black Books, which kind of became like the template for things going forwards. And then obviously Dan Abnett, when he was writing the first trilogy of Horus Heresy books, wasn't spending all his time thinking, what are we flogging? He was just thinking about establishing the world and the story. So, he effectively consistently communicated the difference between someone in power armor versus someone in Terminator armor. And maybe in the case of Abaddon the Despoiler, or Abaddon as he was back then, first captain, he would just call it the Justaran plate, which was, understood to be better than regular Terminator armor. But I don't, or they might even mention now and again Cataphracte or whatever, right? Like they would do it, but I didn't feel like it was really like abruptly in your face with the view of selling things. Like you didn't get to hear often whether Loken was in Mark II or Mark III or Mark IV or whatever it was, right? It never really talked about it.
No, that's true. Although it's interesting, I've just finished reading, I wouldn't say Deliverance Lost, which is all about the Raven Guard and like talking about like the Mark IV and the Mark V. No, Mark V and Mark VI armor. Yeah, that was it. The Mark VI was the Corvus armor. So it was talking about the technologies behind that, how the creation of that all happened. And this is probably like, I want to say 11 or 12 books in, maybe 14, something like that. And obviously that's a very specific thing, which technically could have coincided with the model release, but I don't think it did. And what was interesting when they were talking about in the reveal show about the history of the Heresy, that the actual Black Library books came out, I want to say it was like 7+ years before the game actually became a thing. So they had a real head start in terms of creating the lore that people were consuming that then became sort of manifest on the tabletop. So I think a lot of people, would have expected to have seen a lot of these particular units, armor types, weapon types, vehicles, etc., because they've already been written down. And maybe a lot of that legwork was done up front by the Forge World or Games Workshop team in terms of setting the precedents for the authors to then go off and create stuff, so they weren't just completely having artistic license. I imagine that was quite keyed in. But then maybe there were times when Dan Abnett and co made up terminology, because I've heard him in interviews before where specifically the Eisenhorn trilogy where he was just made up some terms and then that's become common day parlance. The pictographer I think is one specifically more in Heresy, which is just like a camera, right?
Yeah.
And he's done similar things for like Voxcaster and things like that, and I think he came up with a lot of those terminologies, which is great for world building.
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. And it's great that writers of his caliber are given that flexibility to kind of help shape the fluff, the lore, if you will, which is awesome. But in the case of the Saturnine stuff, I'm not a massive hater on it, but I guess in terms of the photography and other bits and pieces, I think the miniatures do look a bit like they're out of the normal range of Heresy. I think a lot of that's probably driven by the paint style as well, though. I think a lot of the time we still, as more sort of seasoned players, associate Heresy paint styles with more of the kind of traditional, kind of miniatures painting methods and more of the kind of
like weathering powders, or like scale model, I think that's
the word
term.
Yeah. And these are very much in the sort of heavy metal GW style, which I think kind of does take something away from them. I do agree with you that the one in the Space Wolf color scheme is definitely a stronger looking paint scheme than the Salamanders one. But yeah, and the captain, or rather the Praetor miniature, I mean, again, cool big hammer, definitely a very powerful, imposing pose. But yeah, I agree. It looks more like something from War Machine. Doesn't necessarily mean that I don't like it. It just means that it feels a little bit out of place. But again, paint jobs and things like that can resolve. On the topic of the Mark II, though, one thing I will say, and again, I don't want to sound like a Luddite, but I always sort of feel like at a distance, I've never really been able to meaningfully tell the difference between Mark II and Mark III. I know there are differences. I won't expect
it's mostly the legs, but you are correct. I was looking at it going, this looks very similar. Like the backpacks, I think, are pretty much the same, at least from the front. The helmets, I think, are pretty similar as well. They don't have the spike through the middle. That's kind of the main. Oh yes, but I think that wasn't that optional anyway, or at least you could cut it off.
Well, I mean, I built a load of them recently, the Mark IIIs, and they all have the spike included on the kit, but you could cut them off. Yes, you are right.
Yeah, it's the most noticeable bit, at least because the chest pieces are very similar to Mark. Is it Mark III's?
Yeah, Mark III's.
I think they're very similar. Yeah, because I've used some for my Thunder Warriors on the jet bikes, and I basically used a couple of those ones, which are like quite thinner sort of style torsos.
Yeah.
And here they look the same. Yeah, the main bit's for legs, where the bottom half is these sort of big sort of plates, sort of stacked one on top of the other, and then the top section's almost like a sort of weird, sort of bar. I don't know how best to describe it. Almost like a ladder going up their legs.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that's the bit of the armour I really don't like. So I thought I would quite like Crusade armour. In the artwork, it looks amazing. But the leg portion of the Mark II just, doesn't look good. And unfortunately, that's just what Mark II is.
Yeah, I think, look, at the end of the day, again, I'm now looking at the two side by side, and it's clear there are meaningful differences between the two, but ultimately, how much does that come across on the tabletop? How much are you going to actually really notice? My argument is you probably won't dramatically unless you're a real aficionado. But yeah, ultimately, look, at the end of the day, more Space Marine kits are always going to be a good thing to see. Again, no real kind of complaints in terms of the fact that they exist. But yeah, I think just for myself as a kind of, layman, I don't massively see the differences between this and Mark III. But again, acknowledge they are there, and ultimately, it matters to someone. So that's great. But for me, it's a bit like whatever.
I would say the Mark II Praetor looks really cool. The very sort of specific detail that they've added to the legs, and like the knee pads and stuff like that. That all looks really good, and it sort of matches the sort of trim on the shoulder pads and the armor sort of around his neck. That looks really good. I mean, like with all the Praetors, including the Saturnine and the last edition box set one, they've got these sort of what I call starbursts, or like these medallions that are just hanging down that have like sort of compass points on them. I don't really like them, and they just seem so overly fussy and overly ornate for Heresy, whereas to me Heresy was almost very like clean cut minimalist looking armor, because that's what we saw in the very first edition of the game, and even the characters didn't seem to have too much overblown detail, whereas the new style, Heresy 2 onwards, the characters just have stuff upon stuff on them.
Yeah, I don't mind that, though, because, again, I think it speaks to the excess and the absurdity of the whole thing. I mean, ultimately, if you are a, crusading force of superhuman warriors putting the universe to heel, you would imagine that people in positions of positions of
Gonna
authority.
look fancy.
Yeah, exactly, right? Again, it kind of leans a lot into, obviously, the Roman Empire, which is a very clear inspiration for a lot of these embellishments. I would say that this Mark II Centurion miniature suffers a lot less with the kind of Age of Sigmar aesthetic than the Mark VI ones before it. I felt like the Mark VI Praetor minis were very out of place within the setting, whereas this sort of feels like it could fit in relatively painlessly.
It's much more toned down, and if you really wanted to take those little embellishments off that are dangling down on his chest, you could do.
Yeah, I'd imagine so.
Quite easily, I think. And yeah, to me, he looks way better than the ones they did in the last box set.
No, agreed. I think, look, on the whole, I think a lot of these minis have got great potential. I'm not really a big fan of the turret that they did, the quad accelerator platform. Not really mad into weapon platforms in the general sense, but I mean, ultimately, it's serviceable is what it is. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, I think on the whole, the minis included, because you're basically going to be getting 50 minis. You get one of these big guns, which has been painted in the scheme of the Iron Warriors here. One of the big dreadnoughts, which is salamander coloured in the box. You get the Praetor, the Centurion, a load of Mark II. So it looks like you're going to get 30 Mark II, and then 6 of these Saturnine Terminator minis, which is...
Plus you get all the disintegrator weapon options as well, which was quite interesting.
They actually threw in those.
Yeah, they said... Did you watch the live stream?
I did, yeah. I just thought they were talking about that as a generic upgrade. I didn't realise that.
No, I think that comes with it. I think they said up to 20 minis can have disintegrators, and then you can upgrade a unit to have a certain number of like the heavy and one of the other variants of the disintegrator cannons.
That's cool.
Yeah, no, I think that is. And the weapon's quite interesting. Obviously, harks back to the Imperial Space Marine that's had a few different versions over the years from, I think he was originally in metal, but then he had a plastic, I want to say like it was 100th. No, I can't remember. It wasn't 100th year. What was it? It was like, maybe it was like 25-year anniversary or some sort of anniversary. I want to say 5 years ago, maybe a bit longer than that it came out. Because we were playing, I think in 7th ed, that mini dropped because it had absolutely crazy rules.
Yeah.
And you could just add it into like any unit for free as well.
Yeah, it was wild. The Imperial Space Marine was absolutely wild.
Yeah, so it's an interesting nod to that. I quite like the design of it. It's quite clunky and funky. For the quad cannon, the quad accelerator platform, I when I first saw it, I was like, I don't really like it. It's a bit too rounded, whereas the old one, if you were looking at things like the Hydra weapons platform that used to be able to get in Heresy, predominantly more for Imperial forces, I want to say, than Space Marines. That was much more like square and boxy, and I quite like that look. And then today I was looking at it up close, and I realised what it's based on, what the design is from. So inside the middle bit of the weapons platform is like this bull turret, and it's basically a Fire Raptor gunship turret.
Yeah.
Like the bull, like piece in the middle is based on that, and I've looked at pictures and it's very similar. Wow. Obviously the position of the guns is different, but that's clearly where they've taken the inspiration of it, which sort of seems a bit odd. I sort of get the nod to it, but it's like that bull design is very airship World War II, bomber design. It sort of makes sense on the Fire Raptor. It doesn't really make sense on a land-based thing, but I can see where they've got the inspiration for it, and they want to tie it into another sort of visual cue of designs elsewhere. So yeah, that was at least interesting to sort of clock and be like, oh, okay, right, I get that. So that's interesting. And then the other interesting thing worth pointing out is the Praetor Saturnine Terminator dude. He has, like, I don't really like the model personally, but some of the other poses are actually really cool, I think. Not the base one with the hammer, but there's a few where he's like got his hands in different ways. And actually, for a sort of starter box, having a character that has multiple poses is actually a bit of a first, I think, because normally they're just sort of standard designs, often push fit, at least in 40k, and you don't get sort of different looks to them. And the fact that you can get multiple poses out of it that are quite different is pretty interesting, I think.
Where are the pictures of the multiple poses for it then? Are they
you know what? I remember seeing them in the live stream, so I'm surprised they're not on the website, which is odd because we're obviously looking at it, and you're right, they're not there.
Well, I'm sure they
wouldn't include them. Yeah,
I blinked and missed it at the time, but yeah, it's cool. I mean, that's the thing with this as well. Obviously, as a box set, there is no holds barred in terms of this isn't like the 40k or even Age of Sigmar strategy, where they give you a easy build box of minis that you can, build with relative ease. Like if a kid was to come in and buy Warhammer 40,000 Leviathan Ultimate starter set, the miniatures in there are relatively easy to build. There's still a layer of complexity to them, but they are relatively easy to build. These are obviously the full kit, so again, it's definitely geared towards the more seasoned hobbyist.
Which would explain why it is a multi-build option for him, because he will just be a standalone kit. Yeah. Whereas you say with 40k, they tend to do easy builds because those boxes are what a lot of people call FOMO boxes, so fear of missing out. They're there for a limited time. They're there to get a ton of sales, and then you can't buy them anymore, but those miniatures sometimes get split out into those starter boxes.
Oh, they always do. They always stick around in the starter boxes, yeah.
Yeah, well, now for the last few editions, that's been the case. But prior to that, it was like Indomitus, that was the only way to buy them was in that. Dark Imperium is the one I was thinking of. Because Dark Imperium didn't do starter sets, I don't think.
Yeah, you might be right. I think it might. Who knows? I can't remember now. It's time ago.
I think starter sets came from 9th edition and then 10th edition, and we didn't have anything in 8th.
That's fair. You're probably right, to be fair.
Whereas this isn't, basically. This will be throughout sale until, I guess, the next edition.
Yeah, Evergreen.
Which is basically 3 years.
Yeah, as is established. And interestingly as well, in terms of at least kind of giving us clues towards some of the design decisions and game design things they're doing, they are also including a bucket of tokens as well. So they're going to give you some range rulers. So specifically, markers, for gauging distances, and then also
different, status symbols, wasn't it?
Yeah, which again is interesting because obviously, there are obviously a number of kind of conditions and statuses and different reactions and things that trigger in current day Heresy. But the necessity to, kind of token miniatures isn't entirely, necessary, I suppose. But again, they've given you objective markers, other bits and pieces in there, which is interesting, I suppose. So it'll be interesting to see how the rules develop. I think that's my main thing with this, is that I feel like the box set is representing a really strong value, assuming this thing is coming in south of £200, which I assume it will be. I think it'll probably sit somewhere between the 180, 190, that kind of range, I'm guessing.
That sounds about right.
They may go to £200. I mean, it feels justified in the sense that there's so much stuff in it. I mean, once you start breaking these things down, if you were to buy a box of 20 Mark 6 Legionnaires today from Games Workshop, I think they're £50. Just look them up.
I mean, the previous one, I think, had more models in.
Yes.
And if it didn't, it definitely had because one of them had, was it a Land Raider and was it a Land Raider and Contemptor? I'm sure it had two vehicles in.
Well, it had the Land Raider Crusader and a Contemptor Dreadnought. Yes, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So I think that had almost as much value proposition as this one. So
but it came out 3 years ago, Phil,
Oh, exactly. There will be inflation tacked onto it, but
GW inflation, tariffs or something. Come on now.
Well, exactly. Yeah, there'd be quite a high price to it. On the talk of the tokens, it's interesting because in one of the ones they talk about, so therefore like pinned, suppressed, stunned, and rooted. And as they were going through them, rooted is or routed, I guess, if you're Americans, obviously means you're falling back and running away. But all the others just sound really similar to each other. It's like a different form of you're not shooting that turn or not quite doing something because you're being shot at. And it's like the nuance in those three isn't particularly clear. But I think once you see the full rules and how it manifests will be interesting.
Yeah.
So it is interesting to see that they've done that. And obviously it's a new edition and they've changed things and they have done like a complete reset. So your old books are no longer going to be valid. And I still can't believe they've done it because once again, it's a new edition and they've still given us the same old templates that have existed for like 30 plus years. It's like the models are bigger now, guys. Make the templates bigger to match the new size models. That's what I want to see with those templates.
Well, they can get around that by restricting the coherency, though, right? Like, I think ultimately, if you've got bigger bases, but you pull in coherency, if you reduce coherency to half an inch, the viability of those templates is still meaningful. In fact, actually, it becomes more meaningful. So I think, even changing it to an inch as opposed to 2 inch would be, a worthwhile change. I just want to finish on the price point, and I will get into the point you just raised there, but I feel like we just need to kind of close that loop, which is right now, if you want 20 Mark 6 tactical squad Legionnaires, it's £52. £52 and 50 pence. There are 40 of those in here, so the implication is that if you were buying those today, that is £105 comparatively. Obviously, you've got the two characters. They carry a price point of probably something like £25 each. So already you're at like 155. The Terminator squads are probably going to be like £40 each. So you're looking at like £80 worth of those. The Dreadnought's probably 60 quid. So once you start to actually work out how much stuff is in here, if it is that this thing is coming in at under £200, it does obviously represent a good air quotation marks value. But it wouldn't shock me based on that statement that if it was 200 quid.
Yeah, it's the current one's £195 out of stock, interestingly, because I guess people are trying to, at least in the UK, that's 2 Praetors, 10 Terminators, 40 Tactical Marines, a Contemptor and a Spartan.
Yeah.
So how many Marines do you get in this one?
46 Saturnine Terminators, which will probably be more expensive than the Cataphracte. So, I think that's the thing. It'd be it would be a really interesting thing to see if GW does pull the trigger on it and go into the realm of...
Because they've never done 200.
Yeah.
Well, at least in UK money.
No.
They've never done 200 on a sort of starter box.
But, and again, it'd be interesting to see if the audience will swallow it, because I think, ultimately... increasing these prices as they have been, there's a psychological thing. Even though you're spending £195 on the old box, it still started with a 1. So there's like a little bit of a kind of cognitive dissonance that you can create where you're like, it's £195, that's fine. But as soon as someone says £200, you're like, no, this is a line we don't cross. And then it becomes like an interesting thing. But I think, it wouldn't shock me if they did it.
I mean, if you've bought any of the previous Heresy boxes, it's like you have probably enough generic Marines, unless you're really interested in Crusade armor, or you're someone that wants all the different armor types, or you want to start a new army maybe, then maybe this is like definitely a bit of a no-brainer for you. If you're a bit like us on the fence with the Saturnine armor, probably give it a miss, I guess, because it's like half the value of the boxes probably in those guys and the Dreadnought. But I can see that being appeal. It's all new stuff, right? There's no old things in there.
I know.
Although you could say Tactical Marines are technically old from a rules point of view. but the mark is different, and that's the big change. And obviously, you got the new disintegrator weapons, so I imagine lots of people just want to get hold of them. And as we've said, you run them in like full units of like 20 or 10s or whatever. So there's a lot of probably good value for money out of that, almost regardless of the price, because regular Games Workshop kits just go for crazy money at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
The prices have definitely ramped up, it feels like, over the last few years in particular.
Oh, without a doubt. It's pretty wild. I mean, this is the thing. I struggle to assert that this is... I think the thing is, value for money is such a subjective thing, and people find value in so many different things. I, for one, wouldn't advocate buying this box set, because I don't think, for me, it represents value for money, because I bought the last box set and it hasn't returned on the investment. But again, it really depends on you and your personal circumstances, how much you're engaged with it, what your community is doing. I have gotten excruciatingly large amounts of value out of the Skaven Tide box set, more so than many different box sets that I've purchased in recent years. I think the Skaven Tide box set for me has been exceptional value, because I play a good amount of Spearhead and I play a Skaven army, so a lot of the miniatures that I got in that box set are in my collection and I use them, and the rule books and everything, right? Like I am getting a lot of value out of Skaven Tide. I think Skaven Tide was an exceptional product for me personally. But if you don't care about Age of Sigmar, probably not that good a purchase. And I think that's the same with Horus Heresy. For me, it's not that I don't care about it. I aspire to enjoy it, but I feel like this box set to me is maybe a bridge too far, and a lot of it's related to what you were just talking about a moment ago, which is the fact that they've decided that despite a relatively short period of time and having essentially come out with a kind of definitive collection of books in 2022 for Horus Heresy's second edition, as it is widely considered, I'm genuinely very disappointed that they felt like against that backdrop they needed to essentially wipe the deck and start again. Like, I think...
Yeah.
And also, by the way, to do that, but not index it, is also really mad. Because the thing is, right, is like, when you look at the fact that they did this in Heresy, you go... Oh, not Heresy, sorry. They did it in Age of Sigmar, they did it in 40k. They went, yeah, we acknowledge that we are wiping everything, so don't worry, all your rules are free until we do codexes, and then you're going to need to buy the codexes, you're going to need to buy the contents. In the case of Heresy, they've not done that. They've just gone, no, or at least they've not done it yet. They may change their mind, but they've basically gone, you want your rules, here's a massive book. And it's like, oh, okay, cool, how much for the massive book? We don't know for sure yet, but my guess is a considerable sum. And it's
like £40 at least.
At least, yeah. Well, they're selling regular 40k codexes for like 35 quid now.
And these are going to be, I guess, probably similarly priced to the Liber books, right?
Yeah,
I don't know
they are Liber books.
They're going for.
Yeah, they are the Liber books, but they're new versions of the Liber books. So
As you say, so 8th edition, when that came around, they had indexes that you had to buy. That wasn't free like you've since had in 9th and 10th edition. So you make actually a good point that I didn't really think about, purely because I was looking at it from the point of view of, oh, actually, it sucks that you got to buy the books, but I'm a Custodes player if I'm doing my Thunder Warriors, and we get given a free PDF to begin with.
Yes, you do.
So I'm okay from that point of view, and I would technically also have the option of playing the Wasteland Strays of the Imperium, the not Imperial Guard, the
Militia.
The Militia, that's it. And I assume they're also, they didn't name them personally, but I assume they're getting a PDF as well. Because they don't actually exist as a solidified kind of, Liber book. So, last time they came out for free, that was interesting. It gave people a chance to at least, because they did do free PDFs last time in the Heresy 2 when they first dropped.
No,
sorry. For Custodes, I don't think they got theirs right away, but the the militia, they got a PDF. That was it. That's why I'm getting confused, because I distinctly remember looking at a PDF for those guys, and that was because they were one of the ones who got a free PDF because they don't really get proper rules.
Yeah, so when Heresy was about to launch its second edition, the community, being as rabid as they were for this new edition, they did a really good job of basically stealing everything. So they got really very good PDFs that were very widely distributed. So you didn't have any issue.
Well, that's because Forge World, despite Games Workshop no longer doing this, still sell EPUBs.
Yeah.
And I think EPUBs then just get converted into PDFs and sort of shared around.
Yeah.
You make another good point. So it's really disappointing that they've indexed it after one of the
they've not even
points,
indexed it. That's the wrong terminology. They've erased it.
They've wiped the edition.
Yeah.
So all those people who are collecting the campaign books, I was really tempted to, but held off on ever buying like the Beta Gammon books, because I thought, wow, even though I'm not a huge player, I will maybe dabble once or twice. I've probably played 4 or 5 games in total this edition, and that's being optimistic. It was probably more like 2 or 3. I was very interested in getting campaign books because I want to like follow the story and sort of see how it all goes and what kind of games you can play. So, and you got that with the first edition, where it's like you start at Istvan and the idea is it's slowly working your way to Terror, and that will be a complete series. And that is really what I want, is I want one whole edition where you go start to finish with all the books, with all the campaigns that you can play start to finish. And sure, you might have individual codexes or army books that come and go, like the Liber books, because they're updating them with new models as they come along. But the campaign books and the core rules should still be compatible with each other, and you have a definitive vision of Heresy that you can play any time period. And that's what I thought first edition was going for. That's what I hope second edition was going for. And clearly that's not the case. And if I'm honest, I would have no faith in buying a campaign book for third edition, because chances are it will disappear and not be valid in 3 years' time. If you're an active player and you want to play the games because you want to play the edition, like in 40k, by all means go ahead and buy it. If you're thinking it from a collection point of view, where this might stand the test of time, and that's what a lot of Heresy players want out of Heresy, you're going to be really disappointed in this edition, I think. And so, my last point, sorry, Dan. Yeah, sorry, no, you go ahead and then I'll say my thing.
No, I was just going to say, because it was relevant to what you were just saying. So I am that person, Phil. I've bought it all of second edition. I've got it.
Did you?
I bought it all because I aspired to play Heresy. I never really did it that much. I've got Heresy armies, mostly on the sprue. I recently, in advance of Heresy 3rd edition being announced, was reinvigorated and started building again. I've got a load of Mark III that I've been working on. I've got a Dark Angel army, basically, and I've been mucking around with it. I've got a beautiful, selection of some painted stuff that I had commissioned from some people because I was really taken by, like, the Lion. It's a game I wanted to play. I always wanted to play Heresy. People down the club play it. It has a huge level of enthusiasm behind it, or at least it did. So I was always okay, because I felt like when I was buying this stuff that I was buying into a system with longevity. I thought this was an investment, because me buying this today would be still potentially able to use it in the future, because I thought they were going to use that same model, i.e. things were just going to iterate and they were going to continue to refine, and ultimately update some of the problem units, deal with dreadnoughts, do whatever they needed to do. But that ultimately the next edition of Heresy that they did would iterate, not erase the past. And I genuinely, based on that, as someone who really wanted to be invested in Heresy, who was happy to buy those books because I imposed a level of longevity on the product that ultimately was, fabricated. I'm now in a situation where I'm like, you know what? Heresy can just go away. I don't care. Like, if you're going to basically kind of sell things on a pretense that, this is a kind of established norm that Heresy players have kind of experienced, I'm sort of done with you. Like, ultimately, I am the guy who, up until now, despite not really playing it that much, aspired to play it, bought all the campaign books, was really in love with the setting, was working towards doing it, is now genuinely like, cool, I'm done. It's like, whatever, I'm out.
Yeah, because if you think about the hobby time from getting, like, buying an army to building it and painting it is so much huger for Heresy than it is for 40k. For 40k, the minimum game technically is 1,000 points, but you can obviously do smaller formats and stuff like that. If you exclude Zone Mortalis, and even Zone Mortalis, I think, starts at 1,500. I don't think it starts at 1,000 points, although I could be wrong. A normal size game of Heresy is 2,000 to 3,000 points. It's like vastly different. The armies are just on the whole much larger. So the time it takes for people to build and paint an army, it would take me an entire edition to do a Heresy army, if not longer. Like, that's how long it takes me to do armies. And I don't want to have bought books that I then just get zero use out of, or very little use out of it, because the edition suddenly changed. And it's like, it doesn't feel nice and it doesn't feel like you're getting value for money, and it doesn't make them feel special at all, which we've talked about loads before. And like the churn of an edition, and it's quite disappointing to see Heresy clearly go through the same thing. And I thought I had seen it talked about during the live stream, but they also mention it here in the article, so I'll read it out word for word, because I think it's quite insightful. And I honestly can't remember if they also said a similar thing in the live stream. So therefore, caveat, this could just be marketing speak and not at all be accurate. But I think it's quite insightful. So it says, a new edition means more than just a massive box full of cool new miniatures. It's the opportunity for the Warhammer studio to take another look at the rules and make the game even better. So what that means is the edition came and then the changes came afterwards. It wasn't the designers thought the game was a bit clunky and it wasn't balanced and that they could make some great new improvements. It sounds like the edition's here, everyone, because the 3-year time has come round, so we can now update the game. And that's disappointing.
That's massively disappointing.
I want them to go, oh, actually, yeah, we need to make some improvements. We didn't get it right last time. Okay, now we're going to update the edition, which didn't need to be on a 3-year timeline. So,
I think the issue is with this, like, we through this pattern of behaviour that has happened with Warhammer 40,000, you associate a level of transience to Warhammer 40,000 now that, ultimately is also ridiculous when you actually think about it. But you give it that kind of status because it's kind of earned it for better or ill. Heresy wasn't that. Heresy is a premium, expensive, prestige thing that is geared towards a very particular, part of the old hobby trumpet, as it's been called in many parts of time. And for this audience, I'm really intrigued to see what the consensus is around this. Now, ultimately, there's still more to come. We still haven't seen the game. We don't know how good it is, etc., etc. But I could just tell you, as someone who is, a more experienced hobbyist who, was intrigued by it, I'm very disappointed by this decision, and I'm struggling to find the enthusiasm to support this release because of it. Like, I can't, in good consciousness, recommend people engage with this. And it's also making me challenge a number of my assertions, because I've also invested quite heavily in Old World, because that was obviously a nostalgia bait thing, but ultimately the idea of Old World is that it was a system that was going to be supported for years and years, and I was going to be able to use old minis, and I was really excited about it, and I thought it's going to be a boutique product where I can buy a Tomb King army that I've always kind of wanted and then play it in relative perpetuity, and any iterative updates would still support what I have with relatively low levels of friction. And I think a lot of that has been earned through the history of these products that the Specialist Games Department has done. Now to see them kind of abandon that in favour of the, kind of mainline Citadel model I think it's just a real shame, man, because like now I'm like, you know what? I've obviously spent the money on Old World. I've spent the money I've spent on Heresy, but probably no more. Like, I genuinely feel like I'm like, these just don't feel like the systems that you should be doing this with. And I don't mean to be kind of hyperbolic. I just sort of genuinely feel like I'm quite disappointed by this. And for me, it's like, if I want to play Heresy, if I want to play it, I'll play the Heresy I bought 3 years ago. You know, not that anyone will want to play it with me anymore, because those who are invested in it will probably have moved on. But for me, it's like, yeah, I'm all right. Like, don't worry about it. I'll let that one pass me by, which is a shame, because when Heresy was being released 3 years ago, I was super excited about it. So much so, I bought loads of it and continued buying it, you know? Whereas now I'm like, no, you've shown your true colours. I'm not interested. Move along, you know?
Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time, like the churn of editions and the disillusionment and how much good faith as a customer Games Workshop can sort of get out of someone. And I have been saying for a long time, like, it does get to a point where their business practices will actually affect customers. And ultimately, maybe they don't care because this edition might get a bunch of new players in, which will offset all the people like us that might go, well, actually, I'm going to step away from this one, or I'm just going to play an older edition because I don't want feel like I'm getting much value for money out of it, which makes perfect sense. When Blood Bowl, the new edition, the very last edition came out, which was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I didn't buy that one because I bought the 2016 edition.
Same here.
But I did pick up last year the Dungeon Bowl because I liked that as a standalone format. Plus, it also had for the most part, the main sort of core rules. So I was like, cool, if I'm going to play the new edition, I might just do that instead. If I'm going to play Blood Bowl, which I still haven't got around to playing in the last year or two, I would go back and probably still play the old edition, or just get a workaround for if someone else had like the new rules, fine, I'll play that, because for the most part, it's quite similar. The great appeal about, as you say, Heresy and Old World is that you got the impression from the precedents of Heresy First Edition that these editions will stay around for a long period of time. Necromunda's a great example. And I always look at that and go, well, this is amazing. It's stuck around and they haven't done a new edition, but what they have done is they sort of reinvented it each sort of cycle of probably 3 years, where they've done like Underhive, they've done Secundus, they've done Ash Waste. They've given you different variants of it, but the core rules are still valid. I think maybe 1 or 2 options in some of the books are now invalidated in terms of like the weapons lockers, like the war gear you can take there's new tables for that. In a way, though, it's also a convoluted mess. There's so many books, it's probably quite overwhelming for new players to get into. And when I've looked at getting into it, I'm like, oh, well, where do I start? Which books do I get? But it's such a pick and choose game. It doesn't matter that it's so vast. It's like, cool, pick this book. To me, Heresy should be the same. It's like, get your cool book, get your Liber, and then you should have 20 plus books of campaigns. Do you want to do like the War on Mars? Do you want to do Siege of Terror? Do you want to do Istvan? Whichever, just pick those books and play them, and play with those campaign books. And that is what I would, that's my dream for Heresy.
Yeah.
Ideally do all of that within the confines of one edition. And then once that's done, maybe that's when you throw it all away and redo it. And, Bolt Action had a similar thing. Bolt Action had a ton of campaign books under its belt, and army books as well for first edition. And no, sorry, it's second edition, because I was looking at, of course, because I've got second edition, and they've recently done a third edition, but that was after 10 years, where there was like, I think that they felt like they had a lot of weight and a need to redo stuff. And it's like, have I bought the third edition book? No, because I haven't ever played a game of Bolt Action, but I like looking at the rules. If I want to play it, I've got the second ed stuff available to me. If and when I ever get around to that system.
And again, I don't know enough to know for sure. But I think in the case of Bolt Action, though, as well, a lot of those campaign books and a lot of those narratives and settings, I'm fairly confident in this statement, but if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't think many of the core characteristics have drastically changed in terms of what they're using to basically shoot, etc. So third edition was, by all accounts, quite iterative in so much as it was, a change to things, but not drastic to the point that you couldn't continue to use older campaign books. And I think that's also true with even Blood Bowl, to its credit. Blood Bowl, yeah, okay, fair enough. They did give you new team rosters and other bits and pieces, but for the most part, the new edition of Blood Bowl fundamentally plays similar to the same as older editions. You're still using the same pitches with the same dugouts with the same teams if you want to. They've just kind of changed some of the particular special rules.
They changed sort of how some of the stats work.
They've changed it.
Rather than it being a value, it's a dice roll, which
correct.
Makes perfect sense. So you could translate it, although I feel like they've added in an extra step, but maybe I'm making that
for the
up.
most part. Again, they made some tweaks here and there, but it is iterative, and I think that's the difference here. And again, you can say that, Heresy is just iterative. We don't know for sure yet, but what they're showing us is that it isn't, because
there's 3 new stats, isn't there?
Well, there's way more than 3. They've added loads. Weapons.
For the core profile of a Marine, for example, there's 3 new stats, which are the old Rogue Trader era ones. So it was cool, willpower, something else which I can't remember off the top of my head. Hold on, is the page open? And then obviously you've still got your normal ones like leadership. Was it cool, willpower? Oh, initiative. That was I think the other one.
They've also added
intelligence. Sorry, that was it.
They've also added weapon damage. They've changed a load of stuff. They've got like initiative modifiers on different weapons when they're melee based. There's a lot of stuff they've changed in this. Now, that's not to say that this is going to make the game worse. I believe there's every chance that this could be a really good game. I'm not suggesting that for a second, but what I am saying is that, through basically giving us those books and making it evident that they're basically going to wipe out all the stuff that you currently own, or in terms of literature, to basically make you rebuy a load of stuff to basically use the same miniatures you had before, it's an interesting decision. And I think it creates a concerning precedent that I think has, in my case anyway, kind of pinned a nail in this game system. Like, I'm kind of like, you know what? I was definitely had it been that they go, there's a new rule book, and these are some tweaks. We've worked some things out. Basically, we are going to release a new Libre for Marines with some new rules in it for different things. We are going to tweak it, but we're going to do it gradually. And it is ultimately not the case that you can't use the stuff you already have with this new rule set. If you basically just want to carry on playing the game with your old books with the new rules, you can, but these are new unit rules that will, better reflect things. Basically, like every edition of 40k prior to 8th edition, where they basically went from 3rd to 7th, where it was like, basically, I can play 7th edition Warhammer 40,000 with my 3rd edition Dark Elder Codex, and it works. They may not be very good, but it works. And that's kind of what I would have hoped for. Not out of the gate, everything's erased, you need to buy everything again. Cheers. It's just, it's a very, very bad vibe. And I think, I genuinely think that, I don't know the Heresy community well enough to speak for them, but I wouldn't be surprised if I discovered that people were disappointed by this. But maybe they're not. Maybe I'm being contrarian, but I think it seems like a bad move from my perspective, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, prior to the actual release, I'd seen lots of people always say they didn't want the editions to change, and they liked the fact that it was going to stick around for a bit longer, at least longer than 3 years. I don't know what the reception to it is now. Obviously, I've seen lots of discourse about the models, but less so about the edition. And I think, you've got to really wait and see what the rules are going to be like. if I'm playing devil's advocate, it's like, well, probably the campaign books are still valid to an extent because the missions, I imagine, aren't going to be affected by the new stats. Sure, there might be new mission types and there might be objectives to now contest, which might be a thing. I can't remember if they talked about that or not on the reveals. But then, yeah, the old book could still be valid to an extent. There's still lore, there's still artwork, there's still missions that you could probably play through with the new edition. And I think basically a change in edition is bad to people like us when it comes to Heresy in the old world, who are casual players, who are playing multiple game systems all at once. So having another change on top of the constant changes of AOS and 40k is just a negative and is something that we don't want. However, if your bread and butter main game system is Heresy, you play every week down like your local club or with friends, maybe you would be very positive to this because maybe you see the problems in the current edition that you do want fixed and addressed that can only be changed with a new edition. I've seen lots of people talk about the old world in a similar way where they're like, cool, I'd be happy if in a year or two's time it gets updated because actually, yeah, some of the rank rules and some of the special rules just don't work as well as other editions of fantasy and that they would want them changed in a certain way. And that fundamentally would require an edition change. Would I want that as a casual old world player who has been slowly collecting up an old world army but hasn't yet played a game? No, I wouldn't want that because I bought that book and I still have yet to get value for money out of it. But, you know, maybe I'm not Games Workshop's target audience for Heresy and the old world because I occasionally buy a book and I'll occasionally buy some models as I slowly collect an army. But I'm not someone that's going to, drop of a hat, buy this new box because I desperately need the Saturnine or the Mark II armor. I'm not someone that looks at all the other new releases, which look very cool indeed, for like the Breachers and, you know, what have you, and go, well, I desperately need these as well. So I'm not the Heresy cash cow. So while we have, I think, very valid opinions on Heresy, in a way, it's like the opinion that Games Workshop can disregard because we're not the people putting in time and money into the game.
Yeah, 100%. And again, like, I'm not entirely sure why it is that I let them get away with it with games like AOS, but I think it's just because it's such an established norm for that. And again, like, you know, the fact that they do the War Scrolls for free at the start of the edition when they index it is nice. And, you know, as I say, when they move from second ed Age of Sigmar or even first ed Age of Sigmar all the way up to third, again, you could still use the books, right? Like, at the end of the day, I could play Age of Sigmar free with a, you know, War Scroll from Age of Sigmar 1. I could do it, right? The game supported it. Again, this obviously isn't the case now, and I think that's the weird thing about it, is like, yeah, sure, people are saying that the rules are maybe a bit clunky in places and need updating, but I don't think they needed to change the, you know, core profiles in order to achieve those aims. Again, with Old World, I don't mind if they go, actually, kind of mucked up and we've not realised the idea of rank and flank. It's more of a monster edition. We kind of mucked that up. We've rewrote the rules to better reflect the vision of what we want to achieve. But basically nothing else has changed. I.e., you can still use the books you have. It's just now the core system has changed. And if you want to engage with that system, great. If you don't, great. Because basically all we're doing is changing the core system, not your army. And I think that's the thing that is really griping me with this. It's the fact that I don't care if they came along and went, here is a better version of our rule set with some new interesting ideas to kind of express these things on the tabletop, but it still supports your current literature. That's fine. It's the fact that doing this has wiped everything out. That's the problem.
Yeah, but that's actually a really good point, because they could have done it in a way where you are limited to an extent in the scope of what kind of changes that you can do.
I disagree with that as well, though, because again, like, 7th edition Warhammer 40,000 is very different from 3rd edition Warhammer 40,000 from a systems perspective. But again, I genuinely pin it on rules writers and developers within GW that don't actually really understand how to create systems anymore. And they keep falling back on this same model where they go, rather than put the rules in the system, we'll put the rules on the units, and the units will dictate how the game is played, not the systems. And that always sort of surprises me, but that's how they continue to do it. And that's what I'm seeing now with the way that they're basically moving things into the profiles, where they're going, oh, there are negative, modifiers to initiative. It does damage. They've added damage in. It's like, for God's sakes, like, can we not just go back to the world where everything just has one wound? Like, why does everything need to have multiple damages? Because you never balance it right. It just never works out. That was my worry when I saw about damage, because damage in 40k, that was almost like a bit of an undoing in 8th edition, where it started off fine. They made Space Marines 2 wounds. Primaris 2 wounds. Yeah. They made Primaris 2 wounds. And that was it. So most weapons were still 1 damage, made Primaris super tough. But then they were like, okay, well, we need an easy way of killing them. So we're going to make Heavy Bolters 2 damage. And then we're going to make, I think, Chaos Marines 2 wounds as well, and then eventually Firstborn as well. I mean, that didn't happen, by the way, until like midway through, or like the arse end of 9th edition, right? Like, it was crazy. That took away to get them. But basically, there was an arms race of like everything suddenly getting 2 wounds or 3 wounds, and then you needed units to have 2 or 3 damage, but then you needed to increase the wounds of units to make that work. And all of a sudden, tanks were being shot to death by 2 or 3 damage weapons when they shouldn't be, in, like, at least in previous editions. So it sort of unraveled the entire system, and it only sort of feels like now that's sort of settled down, where vehicles now get between 15 and 20 wounds to make up for it. Will we see that in Heresy? That would be quite interesting to see if they basically taken elements of modern 40k and ported them across, or is it for something else? Is it for like contemptors to have wounds more akin to a person than it should be for vehicles which have hull points? I mean, it sounded interesting. Like, the initiative order changing for the weapons sounds actually really good, because before you basically had, you hit your normal initiative, you could either strike first or you could strike last. And if you had a power fist, you always struck last, even if you were something that was super fast and had great initiative. Whereas now it modifies it down by a couple of points, so you can still be faster than other things because you're just innately better than them, regardless of the weapon. So I think that's actually a positive, but as you say, and that adds a level of kind of, not necessarily complication, but sort of nuance and within the game, and it is sort of storytelling via the rules. And yes, it's a rule that's on the data sheet, I guess, versus a core rule, but it's changing the principles of the core rule. So I don't mind that per se. Here's the thing. I mean, I've been playing a lot of 3rd edition Warhammer 40,000 again lately, and the thing I find when you go back to that system is that there is beautiful simplicity within the kind of core design, because ultimately there's a common language, right? Like, it's ultimately understood that there is a sort of sequence of things that occur in the way they do it. And it's all powered by systems, because ultimately most units in the game of Warhammer 40,000's 3rd edition and prior editions of Heresy, etc., all kind of were driven by the numbers on the line. My ballistic skill was 4, my weapon skill was 5, my da-da-da was whatever. And that all translated into systems that kind of brought those things to life. Now, people complained a lot of the time that there was complexity in that, because you had to know what ballistic skill of 4 meant and why that, relayed to a hitting on a 3+, right? Like, I understand you had to understand and engage in system mastery to be able to play the game efficiently. But those systems were probably greater than basically literal translations on the page, because basically the old ballistic skill system created nuance, because if you were ballistic skill 7, it meant that you hit on 2s, but you could re-roll your misses at ballistic skill 2, right? So basically, you could with you were ballistic skill 7, you could hit on 2s, but because you were better at shooting than something that was ballistic skill 5, which also hit on 2s, you got to re-roll the 1 and hit on a 5+ because the ballistic skill 2 related to a 5+ to hit. Now, I appreciate it sounds complicated, but the point is that complexity created interesting depth that was also universally understood. And that's why it's great, because ultimately people got it. It was like, okay, cool, I understand how that works because I've learned it. And then everything is translated into the same stuff. When every weapon profile is different, and has different effects on everything. Like the mental gymnastics you have to basically deal with to basically be like, so you got Power Fist? Yes. What type of Power Fist is it? It's a Saturnine Power Fist. Okay, cool. What's that to? -2. Okay, well, what's your initiative normally? I'm 5. Okay, cool. So your initiative 3. Yes. Good. Right. Fabulous. Whereas before they were unwieldy. And what did that mean? Initiative 1. Done. Right? It was like, you know what I mean? Like, it was just, the system created a simple solution that was universally understood. The rules on a sheet, literal thing, creates gymnastics that is a pain in the bum, in my opinion.
It would be interesting to see what they would do. And so, interestingly, I've updated the Horus Heresy website with basically going through all the rumours that they put out there and saying true or false, basically. And one of them that actually I think was classed as false because it was tagged in with something else was, the different armour marks are going to have different rules representing them. And I'm a bit like, that's sort of a bit of a shame because that would be quite cool, despite it maybe adding in a bit of extra complexity. But as you were saying, like a Saturnine Power Fist versus a Cataphracte Power Fist will probably hit a different initiative order because the base characters probably have different initiatives, right? And it's like, I don't mind that expression because it then gives you different ways of having variance in the game between different either characters, unit types, races, if you were to have aliens in there, for example, or just between different marks of armor, because ultimately different marks of armor is literally the only real variance other than, your legion in terms of how people are equipped and why one version of Space Marines fights slightly differently from another version of Space Marines that ultimately all have access to pretty much the same units. So to make it sort of a more of a rock, paper, scissors game, you do need to have a way of expressing those rules. And what I've noticed recently, because obviously I talked about doing the Wasteland game, it's like thinking about a D6 system has very little variance in it. It's like you hit on 2s, you hit on 3s, you hit on 4s, you hit on 5s, or you hit on 6s, and obviously you miss on 1s, right? That is basically 5 different options. That's not much in terms of variance to express.
Oh, hello. You just knocked your microphone out, mate. You there? Can we hear you? We'll be right back. Sorry about that, everybody. We had a few technical difficulties there, but we have hopefully resolved them. Anyway, yeah, so Phil was basically talking about essentially the nuances of a D6 system and how you kind of express that. Now, again, I was going to retort, Phil, by saying that, originally Rick Priestley was talking about this in various interviews in the past when he was talking about the creation of 3rd edition, but even kind of like earlier 2nd and earlier Warhammer editions. There was obviously this mandate from Games Workshop to try and utilize the D6 because the D6 effectively was a kind of known, tactile play device for children. So the idea was the D6 was a more attractive safer way of bringing people into, the Warhammer game systems. So he created the grids, the stat lines, the profiles between numbers 1 and 10 to essentially amplify the D6, as well as obviously layering in the sequencing, i.e. the roll to hit, roll to wound, roll to save sequence effectively kind of created even more kind of variables that essentially, made the gameplay the way it worked. But yeah, his profile of stats from 1 to 10 was his way of kind of incorporating more complexity into the system. Whereas you're right, nowadays, when you start to translate things into literal dice rolls and not actual kind of stat lines, it definitely becomes a lot more, linear. But by all accounts, they're still keeping those profiles, right? They're still keeping ballistic skill the same. They've not changed it to you are now ballistic skill 3 plus 2 hit. You are still ballistic skill 4, for example.
Yeah, no, that's correct.
Yeah. But ultimately, I think this is the thing from a design perspective, is they do very frequently now seek to add more to the individual rules. But again, I think that's the problem. Because again, in the olden days, when they wanted to express the difference between a unit of Cataphracte Terminators and a unit of
Tartarus.
No, what were they called? Tartarus? Tartarus. They basically went, Tartarus are relentless. Cataphracte are slow and purposeful. And you went, okay, cool, I get it.
Yeah. Sort of slight variations in the rules.
Yeah, exactly. But it made a huge difference because Cataphracte couldn't run after you because they were slow and purposeful. But Tartarus could because they weren't. They were relentless, so they could move, shoot, and charge. But slow and purposeful could still move, shoot, and charge. Just couldn't. It couldn't run, and it couldn't sweeping advance you, so it couldn't cut you down after combat. Made a big difference.
Yeah, no, that's true.
But again, that was expressed through 2 universal special rules that were within the system. Now, they may still keep that stuff, but it's an indication with the way they've changed the weapon profiles that they are looking or seeking to put more layers of rules into the individual profiles, which is more in keeping with their modern design philosophies.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at it and I'd found it a bit off-putting. Maybe it's because it's sort of stats we've not seen in a very long time, or in the relation to weapons, you get things like range strength, and it's just like, oh dear God, it's like, for me, what was in a way nice about Heresy was it was a callback to 7th Ed 40k, which is the edition that I sort of got back into the game. So for me, in a way, like Old World, it's a bit of a nostalgia trip, and it's like a sort of a classic rule set that has been, as you say, going on since 3rd edition, and now I guess it's still based on that. This is the equivalent, I guess, of 8th Ed, because it's the true evolution of that edition, or maybe we're technically in 9th Ed 40k if we're from that kind of core rule set, whereas actual 8th edition was like a brand new system, right?
Yeah, look, I genuinely feel like 2nd edition Warhammer Horus Heresy was enough of a departure from the old systems that it had kind of gone off on its own. The minute they added move characteristics, it kind of changed some of the kind of core principles of it, but ultimately it still maintained the core of it. There was still, the way that tanks operated and other things was still sort of the same. So ultimately that's fine. But yeah, depending on what they do with it, it could be quite different. But these are the things we just don't know right now because no one's played it yet, or rather no one who would speak publicly about it has played it yet. All we have is the usual kind of Nick from Games Workshop going, oh, it's great. And it's like, well, everything's great according to you. Like, it's who knows what you've done to it. But I think that's the thing. It's like the older editions of Heresy were effectively this is the thing, right? Like at its core, the first version of Heresy that they did was built extensively by Alan Blythe, who was a really great rules and lore writer, did a great job, right? He created a really compelling world, and he created a really interesting set of gameplay mechanics that took the core kind of systems of older editions of 40k and created their own kind of internal balance. And again, I always retained that, 7th edition Warhammer 40,000 was not a crazily popular system because it was made crazy by the codexes and rules that were written for the various Citadel ranges, whereas Heresy was always viewed really promisingly, even though it was the same game at its core, just because the internal balance between the different armies and rules were really good. And they utilized things like, in early Heresy, Fearless, or They Shall Know No Fear, which was a really prevalent rule back in the day wasn't really there. Like, all of a sudden you had Space Marines that were running away, and it's like, oh wow, this is crazy. Like, what a game. Space Marines that run away. Madness. But, that was how it worked, and it was clever. And all of a sudden, because the majority of Space Marines had strength 4 bolt guns, Rhinos were all of a sudden actually really good. They had front armor 11, so they couldn't be penned or even glanced by bolter fire. And you were like, oh, that makes sense, because in 7th edition Warhammer 40,000, strength 6 was just everywhere. Everything was strength 6 in Warhammer 40,000 7th edition. So Rhinos were absolutely worthless because they were getting blown apart by scatter lasers. So it was like, why would you take them? Whereas in like Heresy, they became meaningfully viable and were balanced accordingly. So I think that's the thing. It's like there's a legacy there of greatness. And I think the thing with the last edition is it was sort of keeping true to that. If they are going crazy and changing this dramatically, I do think there is a kind of diehard Heresy fan base that will just walk away from it or just adopt older editions. We could be in kind of the period of time that Warhammer Fantasy had, where the community just kind of continued to kind of control itself and just kind of go into work for itself and just go, you know what, the new edition exists, we've played it, we don't like it, we're just going to continue supporting the old edition, and we're going to write our own rules for the new miniatures if people want to use them, because we accept that people like Saturnine, they like this stuff. So we're going to just kind of agree as a community and just kind of, we're just going to bootstrap this thing and discard what
it feels like that only really happens when Games Workshop stops supporting a game like Blood Bowl, or when Fantasy left and AOS came about. But AOS was very much like a different game entirely from Fantasy. So I can see why people would try and support those. But it's a bit different here where you go, the community's decided they're not going to adopt 3rd edition. They're just going to play 2nd Ed Heresy. I mean, it could happen. It feels unlikely, but
I don't know. I think it feels more likely than it would do in the case of 40k, because 40k, there's this churn that people go through. I'm one of the rare examples of someone who is still playing 40k events, who was playing them, 9 years ago. And I can tell you on the whole, like 9 years ago when I went to a Warhammer 40,000 events, I'd see similar faces. 3 years later, so, 6 years ago in this example, those faces changed. 3 years again, so 3 years ago in this instance, they changed again. Right now, they're different again still. Like, there were waves of people that were engaging with this stuff over the last 10 years that have come and gone. I have remained for some maddening reason, but a lot of people haven't. And I think that's the thing. I think on the whole, I think the difference with Heresy is that the Heresy community is so rooted and so passionate and so different from that 40k scene that I do think there's a chance they could do it that way if they decide that this isn't for them. And again, I'm sure they're approaching it with an open mind and not just dismissing it as bad from the outset, and I'm certainly not trying to do that. But I'm saying that that's the risk that they're playing with this, that is different from 40k or even AOS, because I think those systems potentially churn in a different kind of way.
And you could go, it's a complicated game, but it's fine because for the most part it's relatively static. But if you go, well, every 3 years we're going to get a new edition with brand new rules, and there's going to be this constant rules creep. In a way, it's like the weight of the rules in Heresy wasn't ever as bad because it was so familiar to older players. Heresy 2nd edition, there were some changes, but for the most part it played and the rules were very similar to 1st Ed. It wasn't like a big departure. Now, that still might be the case with this edition, but the fact that there are so many new stats makes me think that maybe that's not the case, and that it will be a bit more of a departure, or at the very least they're running the risk of alienating existing customers by being a much larger leap to get behind. I feel like there was like a safety of the familiarity of the old rules, and the old rules not really changing.
Here's the thing, though. I will say this, like, as someone who has purchased various specialist units from what was Forge World, now Specialist Games, the resin kits, it will be a bitter pill to swallow if you turn around to me and tell me that my Legion Deathwing companions are rubbish now, because those 5 models cost £78, right? Like, there is a difference here. Like, if you turn around to someone and say, hey, cheers for buying 10 Deathwing companions for 156 quid, right? Thanks for that, but we've decided they're rubbish now. It's like, hang on a second here, guys. Like, this is starting to get a little bit silly, isn't it? Because, like, the level of expense that you go to get your hands on the official stuff and support the official releases, which aren't very well supported through third-party retailers. Like, I'm pretty sure maybe Element do discounts on some of this, but not all of it. Certainly not the resin stuff. So, you know, if you want to get a unit of Inner Circle Knights, you're paying the 78 quid, as far as I'm aware.
Yes.
So if they turn around to you and go, those are rubbish now, I think, you know, people will understandably. And again, when you look at the typical levels of like painting and effort that collectors of these armies put into these kits, I think that's going to be another extra kind of bitter pill to swallow. Because if all of a sudden, you know, your many £100 unit of something has now been rendered pretty hopeless, it's one thing to kind of look at the way that 40k worked and go, well, it'll come around because they'll do these frequent updates. Yeah, I don't know if that's what the Heresy community is going to want, and it just gets a bit mad, doesn't it?
I feel like, in a way, the Specialist Games studio harks back to older editions of the game, and sometimes not for the positive. Yes, there was these long gaps between editions, which arguably should be good. And we talked about this in the last episode when it came to 40k. Like, you don't need to do a new edition to balance units anymore, because you can just produce, firstly, FAQs and erratas, but also you could just go, cool, here's a PDF with some updated rules for some units that need tweaking. And actually, Special Game Studio have been pretty bad at that. So for Heresy and Old World, they've only done a couple of updates and erratas. Like, and quite often it took them like years before they did that for Heresy, and I think even the Old World. I think they did one recently for the Old World, and that's being like a year basically. There was no like, because like with 40k, it's like a game comes out literally like a month or two. Here's the major FAQs for the game. And then as, you know, codexes come out, there's always stuff. And then there's, you know, quarterly stuff as well. So 40k is almost like the other end of the extreme. And what I would like is something in between. I would like longer gaps between editions, but sort of some form of regular updates throughout, to sort of aid, especially with like things like FAQs and erratas where you just need clarification on rules. I think that's super important. They should be doing that way more often. But yeah, some form of balancing and tweaking units that are underperforming would be helpful, I think, in the Specialist Games department.
I personally don't mind it so much though, because I feel like the kind of, I genuinely like when things are left sort of stagnant and you get the opportunity. But again, like the older systems, there were like match-up mechanics and things that where certain units did have uses. Like there were times where certain armies would be super strong, but you could like data mine, you know, your codexes and discover that, oh, if I take a lot of this thing, it actually works well into this particular matchup because of the way that it utilizes these systems. But
or what anyway, you do is you go, well, actually, it doesn't matter if these units are that great, because ultimately Heresy maybe is, rather than a competitive game, is more of a storytelling device. And you'd be like, cool, but these units will be really good in certain narrative events, whether that's Zone Mortalis or some other sort of style of game, or you're recreating a famous battle, and that's why you want certain units in there. And if your opponent is also likewise got a bunch of units that aren't that great, that actually is a form of balance in and of itself. The problem is when you get a try-hard gamer who's super competitive, who's taken just the best units because they're the best units, and then someone's taken a very narrative-themed list that has got a lot of units that aren't very good. That's where these sorts of issues come in, and you know, every kind of community has those sorts of problems.
Well, I would say this, contrary to popular opinion, I would say on the whole, Heresy players like to assert that they are fluffy narrative players, but they do all seem to take the most broken stuff on the regular. And that's based on sort of testimonies I've had from other Heresy players. It's always that case of like, people like to pretend that they're in it for the fluff, but the fluff does mean that they take 10 of the best things.
And to be fair, I sort of feel like that may be more a tournament specific or an event specific thing where you're going to an event.
Maybe.
There is no social contract. So you go, the social contract is you're all taking the best thing. So that's why you get sort of the filthy gamers at tournaments for that reason, where unless it's a deliberately sort of narratively tailored event that's designed to tone down those more egregious lists. Whereas it might be...
Yeah, but then people just end up exploiting that. It always is the way. It's like, again, it was like those flipping crusade events that we went to, or these campaign weekends that we went to, like when we went to the Age of Sigmar one, and there was some lad jumping for joy because he got some absolutely crazy combination of things because he kept miraculously winning by huge margins, even though he was clearly cheating like crazy. And he was just like, oh, I've done this by this many points, or I've got this stuff and I'm amazing now. And it was always like, flipping heck, mate. Like, all right, good for you, but Jesus. But again, that's a whole set of experiences in terms of how people approach these kind of, like you say, social contracts and systems.
Yeah, my point was, though, just to finish off, was I wonder if those filthy gamers, right, are actually quite casual narrative gamers when it comes to just their mates down the local hobby or playing.
Most likely.
And they're only taking the try-hard stuff because it's a tournament and because they want to win the tournament, or they just don't want to get completely wiped. We've had that many sort of discussions when it comes to sort of more narrative or casual Throne of Skulls type tournaments, the doubles events where we've gone, well, let's take a sort of fun list, but then you end up against a team that have taken it really seriously and treated it more like a tournament. You then go, okay, well, is it our fault for taking a rubbish list that's sort of fun and thematic, or is it their fault for, taking a try-hard list?
Yeah. Don't bring a knife to a gunfight, I suppose, is the is the long and short of it. But again, it's difficult because things are kind of presented one way and then are realised differently. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, it was a good reveal. If we can kind of wrap it up, I felt like the actual reveal they did was good. It went out at a sensible hour, which was great. Like, actually went out at a time when I was awake, which was a nice change of pace. So credit to them on that front. I think the way that they kind of tried to celebrate or shine a light on the broader aspects of Heresy, i.e. the book series, the heritage of it, I thought that was really nice. I am excited about some of the minis in terms of the fact that I think they've got some great stuff on the horizon. The Breacher unit is something that fans of Heresy have wanted in plastic for a long time, so it's cool that they're coming. The Mark III assault squads look super cool as well, and it's heavily rumoured or kind of clearly shown here that they're going to be getting into Dark Mechanicum, and there's obviously some new Custodes stuff coming down the pipeline. So it all seems really exciting.
Custodes, that is sort of exciting, I think, yeah.
Absolutely. But on the whole, I would say that for me, this set of reveals had the overarching opposite effect on me, which was, in conclusion, I'm happy to just let this one pass me by. I accept the fact I was excited for the last edition of Heresy. I bought the box set, loads of models, got all the books, was really aspirationally invested in the idea of playing Heresy. Never quite got round to it because we got into Age of Sigmar instead, and other things and other priorities came along, and it is what it is. But ultimately, I was someone who was Heresy adjacent, who is now out the door. I've no interest in this whatsoever. Good for you if you are, but genuinely, it's a no from me. And I think a lot of that is because of the quite boneheaded decision by GW to essentially wipe everything out and start again. And I think, the game may be great, but at this point in time, I just don't care. They really didn't hit me in the FOMO. I have no fear of missing out. This one can just fizzle out as far as I'm concerned. The trailer was good though. Credit where credit's due. Cool trailer. Lots of good stuff, but the overarching release leaves me cold. What do you think, mate? Give us your thoughts.
The trailer, I really liked the bit with Valdor and Malcador talking.
Oh, that was cool.
To me, I was like, this is what the Amazon TV show just needs to be. It doesn't need to be live action, because this is almost as good as, and in theory could probably do better special effects by keeping it all sort of animated, for want of a better word. So that bit to me was by far the most interesting bit of the trailer. The bit where it sort of got into, just Marines shooting Marines, my brain sort of just switches off at that point, and that bit was a bit generic. Some of the set pieces were a bit more interesting, but the vehicles trundling along looked like they're Legions Imperialis size. Like the scale wasn't really quite there for that. But yeah, parts of it was really good. Part of the reveals, like the actual sort of the not FOMO box, didn't really interest me all that much, but the miniatures that are coming out in the future, just, the classic Marine stuff, seems much more cool. I prefer the aesthetic of it.
Yeah.
It's classic stuff that I know people want to see in plastic. That's all great, I think. Just Mark II armor just isn't quite hitting it on the head for me, and I think Saturnine currently in my head is a miss. The Dreadnought's got more potential, I think, than the actual Terminator armor. But I'm willing to wait and see it in person, see how I feel about it. I'm also not the target audience for it. And for me, playing Heresy, it would either always be with the militia or predominantly with my Thunder Warriors. That's why I built that army, to sort of be a Custodes in 40k and Heresy. So for me, I'm still quite happy to at least give the game a go. I won't be buying the box. I won't be buying the rules. I'll happily keep an eye out on the previews to see what the rules are going to be like. I obviously get the rules for Custodes for free via the PDF that they've talked about. So if all of that entices me, I might try and get some games in. But maybe the problem then is, who do I play against? If someone like you, or maybe Tim, who I played before with Heresy, isn't that interested in the new edition. So, yeah.
Big Phil's your answer.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to, out of the people that we definitely know plays a lot of Heresy, how they feel about it. Because obviously, we're not the real core demographic. But as you say, we were always potential customers. And, yeah, the new edition is a bit off-putting, if I'm honest. So that's a bit of a miss, I think, in that regard. But the other parts of the reveal show were pretty good, I thought.
Yeah, I'm genuinely tempted after that reveal to take what I've got. I don't think I'd ever sell the Lion just because it's a beautiful paint job. Big Phil did it for me, and he did a great commission on it. I'm really happy with the Lion as a centerpiece mini anyway, so I'll probably keep hold of that. But I think a lot of the stuff that I've had sort of painted otherwise, I might just flog and see if I can get some decent profit out of it, because it is beautifully painted, and then just get rid of all the unused resin that's all sold out online by the looks of it, and try and get some value back out of it, because I just don't think there's ever going to be a set of circumstances where I get around to using this anymore, because the reality is no one's going to want to play the older edition with me, and I can't be bothered to play the new one. So I think basically what I've determined from this is all my Heresy stuff is going on eBay. So yeah, hopefully the other fans of it are more infused and want to buy it off of me, because I'm really underwhelmed by this, but whatever. It is what it is.
Yeah, it's hard to speculate. Generally, what would we have been happy with? As you say, a soft launch of an edition where everything's still valid would have definitely helped. Potentially not really.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the closest to it, or just an update. I would have quite happily, like the Necromunda style, just give us a new launch box, but the rules are the same, and maybe you've updated some of those rules very minorly, effectively just clarifying a few things, maybe changing some of the more problematic rules, and the new book is just a consolidation of that. But if you're tweaking one or two lines in an entire rulebook, you don't need to go out and buy that new rulebook if you don't want to.
Well, I think at the end of the day, if they overhauled the reaction system and kind of added some new layers of depth to that, had they just kind of streamlined some of the other bits and pieces to make it clearer, tightened up some of the wording, massively overhauled the layout, for new players, the old Heresy rule set was horribly laid out. You had rules all over the place. I think that would have been helpful.
They could have learnt a few things from the 40k team, just like bullet point stuff. Like, I don't mind there being sort of non-legalese text. I think that's very good, just having sort of wordy, written out rules. But I think sometimes, especially for the core rules, just have some bullet points summarising like what's happening in this phase, for example, would be really helpful, just so when you're picking up and trying to learn the rules. And as you say, the layout of where things were often a bit higgledy-piggledy. I remember the universal rules aren't in alphabetical order sometimes because of just convenience of layout, and that's something that Games Workshop constantly do to my frustration. It's like, no, just keep it in alphabetical order, please. So stuff like that they could have definitely leaned into. Well, I mean, maybe they have in those regards. Maybe the new book is like that.
Oh, yeah. I acknowledge it's probably better laid out and all those other things may come into effect, but I think, for me, basically it would have been cool. Give me a new rule book which tightens up some of the rules, does a new layout, deals with some of the, incorporations of FAQs and other things that they've iterated over time. And then in the box set as well, give me a separate book, which is the Saturnine campaign book that just has all the rules for the Saturnine models that are new, and just go, there you go. It's a new campaign book with some new interesting missions, a new core rule book that you can buy separately if you want to. And that's it. And you're still using the old stuff and it's cool and done. And then maybe in there you could have addressed some of the problem units like dreadnoughts and come up with a thing. But then maybe through the, changes to rules, you could have incorporated methods for making dreadnoughts weaker through just a bit of a system mechanic. But again, creating systems is difficult, whereas writing rules on a sheet is a little easier, So, yeah. And again, I think people sometimes, I don't know if I always do a really good job of expressing what I mean by that, but I'm going to leave it at that because ultimately I need to go to bed. So, there it is. Hope you enjoyed it. We're going to move on now to the outro, transitional noise. So I've checked and double checked. This is the right microphone, right, Phil?
Yeah, sounds it. Tap it. Yeah, that's good.
There we go. Apologies for the last episode, everybody, where I mucked that up. I probably could have done more in the edit to kind of deal with my rubbishness and amplified Phil's normalness, but I didn't have time because I'm a lazy boy. Or I'm not a lazy boy, I'm a busy boy, is the long and short of it. So anyway, apologies to everyone for that. But it is the outro of episode 205. Hilariously, this is one of those episodes where it's the first thing we're recording, which often is the case, to be fair, because 9 times out of 10, me and Phil enjoy the outro most of all. Almost like really what the Lookout Sir podcast should just be is this. Don't you reckon, Phil?
That's true. I think you are a sucker for doing the fun stuff first and the hard work later, Dan, because you're the one that always insists on doing the outro first, whereas I would savour it as a juicy reward for doing the Codex review.
Yeah, but what you got to remember is though, Phil, where you got off the roller coaster after we finished recording the Emperor's Children stuff, I was left with the hard work of obviously doing the Emperor's Children stuff and then editing it and putting it out. And you've just been on easy street the last few evenings, not having to worry about any of this. Whereas for me, as is often the case, I spend every other Friday night putting this thing together. So, ultimately, this is my reward, essentially, after all the hard work. And then I get to do it again, and then it goes back again. It's a beautiful thing. A life of turmoil. There you go. We're almost, in fact, we pretty much are at the point that this comes out, halfway through 2025. Hilariously now, Phil, we are, I think, at this point in time, we're 11 months away from 11th edition. Isn't that right?
I was thinking that just, I think today or yesterday, in relation to, obviously we're doing the World Eaters Codex, and it's like, oh yeah, how long will that codex be valid for, assuming there's a reset in 11th edition, which they might not do, but I sort of speculate that is the new normal for 40k, because I think it just, in a way, it gives everyone an initial rush of enjoying the edition, and that there's a bit of a reset, and you feel like you've got something new to be excited about because your rules have changed, and they also get to sell more stuff like the index cards and things like that. So I suspect that's what we get this edition, even if they just do minor tweaks to the rules.
It's weird though, isn't it, though? Because if they did another index edition, I am in a privileged position that I've put myself in by doing this podcast. The privilege is the fact that people listen and support us, and obviously a massive thank you to our patrons for doing so. But so effectively, if I am still doing this podcast next year, which by all accounts I will be, but you never know. I always like to say, who knows? But, if in May, June of next year, I am, not doing this podcast anymore, I'm not sure that I would be super keen to early adopt 11th edition based on what 10th edition has been thus far and the proposition of spending all that money again. I think for me right now, if I wasn't in the situation I'm in, I don't know if 11th edition would pull me in if they indexed it. And I'm being sincere about that. Like, I'm really struggling at the moment to find the enthusiasm again for 40k. And again, I think people deal with this as they go up and down throughout their kind of hobby cycle. And I'm fortuitous enough in the sense that I get to play a bunch of different games. And I do love 40k as a setting, as a world, but I do struggle with it as a game still. And again, I've been going hard on 40k. I'm about to go to a 40k golden ticket event and all that stuff, but it's just that thing where I'm like, for what 10th edition has been and what it is presently to me, I'm not loving it as much as I love Age of Sigmar, and I know people who don't understand why Age of Sigmar is good don't like hearing that it's better than 40k, but it is better than 40k, and I think this is my problem with it at the moment. It's like, if I wasn't doing this, I don't know if I would buy another edition of 40k, no matter how sexy the Space Marines are that they put in it, because I'm kind of at that point where I'm sort of like, I'm starting to become a lot more dubious about supporting the ceaseless 40k system.
Well, it works for everything, right? Because AOS is on a 3-year cycle. Heresy now is on a 3-year cycle, it seems, which is disconcerting because I only bought that rule book like a year ago, and I've had, a couple of games out of it, and it's like, cool, if a new book comes out, I won't be buying it, and unless I was going really hard on that system. And I think that's the case if you are much more casual, because you're splitting your attention across multiple game systems. So for us, it's predominantly Age of Sigmar and 40k. So I think you have a bit more of a luxury to maybe not care about a reset for 40k as someone that would just be playing all the time. I mean, I'm enjoying it. I've said this many a time. I'm always more invested in the world of 40k. But AOS probably has a neater, more concise rule set, but the world building just isn't strong. Well, it's just not as good as 40k, basically, and that's the be all and end all of Age of Sigmar. So that's the thing that really lets it down, and I don't know what they can do to really fix that problem other than time, basically, to add more stuff.
Yeah, I think it's the weight of history with 40k that gives it power, though, right? I think because there is a inbuilt nostalgia for the world that they built that, you know, was something that we first experienced in our childhoods. That nostalgia thing is always going to play a factor, right? Like, I think there is a lot more weight and a lot more kind of significance put on characters and worlds within 40k just by virtue of what, you know, when it came into existence.
And I think you see that in the old world as well, because to me that has a lot of nostalgia, because that was like my first Warhammer game I was involved in as a kid. But even though it's not exactly Warhammer Fantasy, because it's in a different time period.
But this is the thing, and I'm not trying to sort of like become just this weird kind of like hardcore advocate for Age of Sigmar. Yes, the game is way better in my opinion, and I have so much more fun playing it because I think it just offers so much more tactical depth and so much more kind of opportunity for really fun, expressive gameplay, which is why I always find it crazy why people always say that it's a bit boring or it's a bit bland or a bit unimaginative. And I'm always like, I just don't think you understand or haven't really played it. Like, I think a lot of people pick it up and go, oh, it's not 40k. It's like, well, no, it's not. And then it's like, well, I don't like it. And it's just like, anyway, regardless of my grumbles about people's kind of, you know, understandable ability to dismiss Age of Sigmar, I will say that the setting of Age of Sigmar is probably better than maybe we give it credit for. Because, I mean, again, if you look at things, and again, I'm not suggesting that it is better than 40k, because I don't think it is, but I think a lot of the stuff they're doing is quite interesting. Like, again, if we just look at something like, say, like the Daughters of Cain, the idea that there is this kind of exemplar of Cain which is seen through Marathi, and the idea is that Marathi is this now godly character within the Daughters of Cain, who is this powerful leader that is essentially ascending to godhood and leading those particular elves in that particular kind of fashion. But she is herself a kind of corrupted character, and there's a lot of layers of depth to that. And they've introduced that now where they've got her kind of like counterpart in this new hero, the Crone, who I forget the actual name of, but you know, they've introduced that sort of duality within just that one faction. They've layered in all this really fun, complex sort of the enemy within type nuance to the army, and it's interesting because they're creating lots of narrative threads that they can pull on at later dates. I really like the Idoneth Deepkin, the idea that they are Teclis's army made in the kind of image of a particular kind of old timey-wimey elven kind of visage, but the idea that he's just like, nah, I don't like him, and has just sort of banished them to the sea. The idea that he's so kind of like fickle and jealous and petty, that you know, all of that stuff's super interesting. And like I said, the setting of Age of Sigmar is actually quite cool. It's
quite deep, and they've definitely improved on it over the years. Like it's now got maps, which I find quite interesting.
Yeah.
It's one thing I've always liked AOS that it's done that 40k has only just recently started to do, and that's like it's had an ongoing story that it feels like you play through the editions, and each edition is like sort of a different time period and a sort of particular setting, and that there's like a theming. So at least in the last two editions, it's like, yes, this is the focus on these particular realms, which maybe doesn't quite help express your own army if you don't want to be in those realms or from those realms potentially, whereas earlier editions gave more weight to the realm that your army was from and had rules mechanics to express that and stuff like that. So I think that's good. I think I'd be quite interested in picking up some of the roleplay books, and we've talked about it with Richie about doing is it Soulbound? I think it is.
Soulbound, yeah.
And they've got a book specifically based on Ulfenkarn, which is where Curse City is set, and I really like the Curse City as a setting. I've yet to play the game, but obviously I've been building the models for my vampire army, which is sort of not really a thing because those models, bar for zombies and skeletons, aren't really in the game anymore.
Or at least won't be after a year.
Yes, yeah, technically. So yeah, I'd like to play the game. I think I'd like to at least read some of the rule books for that expanded sort of lore, and that was actually where most of the weight of the Warhammer Fantasy setting came from. It was expanded in the roleplay games. So I picked up a load of those as a kid. So I think I should sort of do the same for AOS to give it the same sort of treatment. And yeah, so and I think they're doing a lot of novels and stuff like that. So I think they are getting there. I think I do struggle from the point of theming or customizing an army, and that's something I talked about before, whereas it feels like it's quite difficult to give an army personality. In part, I think it's difficult to convert the models because they're in a way so good to begin with. But also a lot of the figures are sort of either quite detailed and there's not as much interchangeability with the factions in the same way that you get with 40k, where if you take an Imperial army or like a Chaos model, you tend to be able to interchange a lot of the weapons or arms and stuff, all sort of similar scales, which, maybe you can do between some of the elf ranges. But Cities of Sigmar sort of really just work with Cities of Sigmar and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I think, when it comes to their world and what they're doing and fleshing out through the roleplay books and other things, I think that's all happening. I think the thing is, though, it's just, there is definitely, it was almost at the start, I think we've had this conversation before and probably multiple times before, but it was almost too broad. It's like you couldn't see the wood for the trees. Now they're starting to laser in on things. But anyway, my point was more just to sort of say that where I'm at with 40k at the moment is sort of like, I do enjoy it. I had a great weekend playing 40k doubles with yourself, Phil. That was great. I really enjoyed that. I had a really good weekend TOing at Beachhead Brawl. I really enjoyed that. I like being part of the community. I like contributing. I like that casual setting with the doubles. I've enjoyed, playing casual games down the club with the regular kind of club goers, and that's been really fun. So it's not like I hate 40k. It's just the thing is I find that I struggle with it a lot as a system versus older editions and other game systems. And I think that's the thing. It's like there's a part of me that is having fun because I think the minimal viable product of me and someone I like being together and playing a game is enjoyable innately, but I think the game just it's rough for me at the moment with it. I'm struggling to love it in the same way as I am with AOS. And what my point is I don't know how representative that is of most 40k players. My assertion is it isn't. I think most people are all in with it and love it for what it is, and God love you. It's fantastic that that's how you feel about it. So I think for a lot of the kind of hardcore player base, I think many of them will migrate across to a new index edition. But yeah, genuinely, for the first time ever, for me, I stopped buying all the FOMO boxes a couple years ago. I've still bought a couple of them, but not all of them. I wasn't falling over myself at Christmas to buy the Deathwing box, for example. And then, I don't know. I'm curious because I guess for Games Workshop, the trick is really what they're trying to do is achieve the churn. They're all about the churn. Whereas, obviously I'm not really the churn. I'm kind of stuck in it. I'm a core consumer. I'm a bit of a whale, I suppose, in that regards, to use that sort of terrible vernacular. But that's the thing. It's odd to me because I'm just I don't know anymore. I think if they index it and go, here's 11th edition 40k and we're completely reinventing it again, I'm just not so sure. I'm not saying I wouldn't play it. I'm just saying I wouldn't fall over myself to go out and buy the books and do all the rest of it if I wasn't doing this, I suppose. I think this is probably keeping me in it more than I would naturally.
Yeah, it's like, I guess with AOS, we were late adopters to AOS 3. We'd played it for like just over a year, I think, before AOS 4 came out. And we were quite early adopters with that because we were really enjoying AOS. But part of me, I would have been quite happy if we'd have just stuck with AOS 3 for a while. Especially if we're mostly just playing amongst ourselves. Like, we could have got more use out of that system. And I don't think we would have got particularly tired of it straight away. And
no.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think with what they previewed, did you see it was out today about the new chapter approved? Like, that sounds quite interesting in terms of the...
I've not seen it, no, what they said.
Oh, so there's like their catch-up mechanic rather than it being secret missions, as if you're 6 points under, which is similar to AOS, you get a card which, much like Spearhead, can be either an objective to do or a stratagem. And I'm like, oh, this is brilliant, because we've said this for a while, that that's such a cool mechanic, it should be in the main AOS game. And then they've talked about the different sizes. So Incursion, which is a smaller size game, has its own deployment zones from the 2,000 point games. And it seems like instead of doing 3,000 point stuff, what you've got is the asymmetrical gameplay, which is more, it's like a casual gameplay option, which I think is really interesting and really positive, that there's something in addition to match play that you can do for slightly more narrative stories. So all of those things seem really positive to me. So I'd be quite keen to see how those go.
Yeah, me too. And maybe that is part of my kind of frustration with it as well. Maybe I'm just at a point now where I've been playing what feels like very similar kind of missions for the couple of years now, because, like, to be fair to it, the Pariah Nexus didn't feel dramatically different from Leviathan. Yes, okay, fair enough. They changed the gambits into secret missions or whatever the difference was between the two, and you know, basically the gambits were things you never took, and then for a while the secret missions were supposed to be these incredibly powerful mechanics everyone were going to use, and then it turned out no one used them. And I think that's the thing with it. It's like, I think maybe it just feels like it's been a couple of years of playing the same sort of stuff. So hopefully this is the refresh that it needs to give it a burst of life as we go into its, you know, into its twilight year. Basically, this is it. This is the last roll of the dice for 10th edition 40k, and Lord only knows what's going to come after it. I mean, obviously another edition of 40k is coming down the line. What that will be, obviously, we will wait and see. It will obviously have some flavour of Space Marines fighting against some flavour of thing in a box set, and inevitably the Imperium will be stretched even further to breaking point. I mean, like, literally, it's going beyond the bounds of, you know, it's just getting absurd, I suppose. But ultimately, that's the nature of the beast. I think I'm really intrigued to see what 11th brings to the table and whether or not they go index. I think in a way, what I imagine they'll probably do is tweak some of the points and tweak some of the systems and figure out what to do with it and make some changes to the sort of core rule set and move it along and keep everything the same. But then the weird thing about that as well, I suppose, though, is like, do we I don't know, it's weird, isn't it? It's like, because if the intent is that they just go, okay, cool, the rules are the same in terms of the core, and we're just going to systematically update your books with a couple of new miniatures. Does that feel significant enough now? Does that feel like a good get? Or do you feel like that's just a bit half-baked when they're just like, you know, halfway through the edition, we're just going to go, here you go.
Yeah, sort of like, what would be the point in giving us new rules or new codexes beyond the point of, we just want to sell you something, unless there is a significant change? If if your codex already exists and works, like it feels like there used to be a time when a codex was pretty meaningful because maybe you didn't even get one for the last edition, or you haven't had one for like 5 or 6 years. So getting a codex often meant, balance changes, improvements, rolling in new models. But we sort of live in this world where all the balance stuff happens on a quarterly basis anyway. Rules updates happen in a similar sort of fashion with the balance data slate. And then, your missions are changing yearly anyway. So that's sort of where I've always gone. I've always looked at it where you don't really need new additions per se to keep the game fresh unless you're going to fundamentally change core rules. So they could go, well, this time we're going to keep it mostly the same, but what we're going to do is introduce new universal special rules, a bit like in AOS. Maybe you've got things like an anti-keyword, or you're going to have more like critical hits do things. Critical
they've
wounds.
got all of that already.
Well, they've got a few, but they don't have quite as many as what they have in AOS. So let's say they're going to expand upon, it's not just lethal hits and it's not just sustained hits. Maybe there's going to be a couple of other ones. We don't, I'm not going to make some up on the fly, but let's say they're going to do that. Then you go, well, okay, do we now need to index everything to incorporate those rules into the existing units, or can we hold out and those things will be rolled into a codex? And that's when you get your meaningful update. But then you get the haves and have-nots with that problem.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and here's the thing, right, as well, is like... Because when they did this in 9th edition after 8th edition, one of the other things they did, if you remember, in 9th edition is they introduced the Warhammer 40,000 app. And one of the selling points of the Warhammer 40,000 app is everything in it is free until they subsequently get released in 9th edition, and then you got to put the code in.
Yeah. And they did that with Temp as well.
They did it with Temp, but again, everything was an index, so it kind of felt justifiable. I'm curious if they're going to do something like that to kind of get around it, where they go, hey, we're going to push loads of updates. Because, I mean, to be fair, right now, if you're a Dark Angels player, say, or an Adeptus Mechanicus player, your book's basically worthless anyway. Like, literally, if you own a physical copy of the AdMech book, it's barely representative of what you actually have now, in terms of, like, the ways that they've just kind of amalgamated or altered rules over time. And I think that's the thing. It's like, in a way, like, if they turn around to you or us at the end of this edition and go, hey, good news, the start of 11th, we're going to now unlock the app again so you can have everything for all of a couple of weeks until we introduce the new Codex Space Marines, and then you've got to buy that, blah, 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 start that again. But again, is that interesting? Because again, this is stuff that they're kind of paywalling right now. Are they going to drop that? I don't know. There's all this stuff that is going to be really interesting to see how they navigate it. Personally, I'm a big advocate of the idea that rules should be free. Mm-hmm. I think at this point, it just makes the most sense. It's one of the most baffling things about AOS 4, and definitely one of the things I will, not praise them for, is the fact that they went from a freely available model to a paywall, and I think that actually is to the game's detriment. Not that you can't get around it with the internet, but the point is that it is really weird that they've become so precious about that in the latest edition. If you want people to legitimately find your rules to become new customers or prospective customers to, buy into the edition, buy a faction, how can they do that other than, look at vague rule previews on Warhammer Community, or, basically pick a faction based on how it looks or what they've read on a wiki page, most of which are official sources. Obviously, there's the overall Warhammer 40k, Warhammer Age of Sigmar sort of websites which give you tiny overviews of each faction. But basically, it's sort of encouraging their customers to go out of their way to find illegitimate versions of the rules, just so people have an understanding of the game before they buy into it, and therefore they're sort of getting sucked down the wrong ecosystem from a Games Workshop perspective.
so because if you've discovered them, so well, why would I now buy the app when I've already found this other thing before I've even maybe purchased any models? Whereas getting people sucked into that Games Workshop ecosystem where you're like, okay, cool, the rules are free. And even if you go, well, the rules are free, but the army builders are behind the paywall, which is what they have it like at the start of the edition. But at least that's, funneling customers into that paywall. So there's still a paywall for Games Workshop.
Yeah, agreed. I do think it's weird, though, in terms of how they operate on that stuff. And I do think it's going to be interesting to imagine how 11th edition goes. Obviously, they'll figure it out and they'll do what they think is best. But I think for me personally, I would like to see them. I don't know. I think in retrospect, I would like to see them not massively alter the edition. Truthfully, I would almost like for them not to alter it at all. Just kind of carry on with it, but just change those other elements. But yeah, to your point, it's super interesting now, isn't it? Because everything changes all of the time. So it's almost like, it's almost really, again, gone are the days where we waited for a White Dwarf article, waited for a new codex to illuminate us on these things. But also gone are the days where Games Workshop, as was sort of evident with the Emperor's Children book, gone are the days that those guys are putting crazy amounts of effort into these things anyway. It's like...
Well, they can't if they've got, they've got to do a new codex for every faction every 3 years, and that's a churn in and of itself. Whereas if you were sort of spreading that out effectively over like 2 editions, you're buying yourself more time. And even then, back then, even if you think about 5th and 6th edition, you probably, and this is me guessing, you probably doubled the number of factions in the 40k setting.
Well, certainly just by virtue of the amount of new Space Marine flavors you've chucked in there through supplements and other things, and then, probably double. Probably, I think because
Chaos was just Chaos, and Chaos Demons, and now it's that's 5 or 6 different codexes if you include Knights as well.
Oh yeah, like Chaos. Yeah, Chaos used to be Chaos Space Marines and Chaos Demons. Now you're right. Yeah, now it's 7, isn't it? Yeah, it's Chaos Demons, Chaos Space Marines, the 4 different flavors of Chaos Space Marines, and Chaos Knights. Yeah, so 7 different types of chaos, which is pretty wild when you think about it.
Back in the day, you did have different ways of expanding upon that. So you had, supplements, and you had Forge World all giving you, different army lists for different stuff. But that was still quite low in comparison, I think, to what you have now.
And again, they were specialists, right? Like they were done in a very particular way to service a very particular niche, right? It was very different. It wasn't core GW. It was much more kind of like premium, more adult content. Not in that way.
Yes.
Yeah, but, you know what I mean. But, it's interesting. I think, I'm eager to see what 11 will be, but it's mad to think, like I say, a year from now, it will be on the verge of coming out. It will have been announced it would have been announced in kind of like April time at Adepticon, as is their kind of standard. Maybe they'll do a Warhammer Fest in 2026. It is a significant event, so... Yeah,
true. It feels like Warhammer Fest is now just moved to America because the latest gaming, I can't remember what they're called, the Warhammer Opens over there has lots of stuff happening. It's not just the reveals, there's the narrative games, they're doing painting workshops and all sorts now. It feels like they've just shifted it over there because I don't know if it's because they actually employ someone and that's their job to run those events, and you don't really...
They do, yeah.
You don't have an equivalent to do just run events within the UK and Europe. You have
that's not true.
You have the events team, but that's specifically located at Warhammer World, and that isn't tailored to do a Warhammer Fest type show. And it feels like no one's being paid a full-time job to do Warhammer Fest, and because of that, it's almost a lot of effort to get lots of people to be willing to do that. And I think after the debacle of the last one and probably the negative feedback they got, they just thought, well, why bother?
That's fair. Again, I stand by what we said about Warhammer Fest when it happened, but the thing is there was Warhammer Fest 2024, and then, 23, wasn't it, Warhammer Fest? Yeah, 23. There's Warhammer Fest 2023, and then there was Warhammer Fest 2018, 2019, 2017, which were all excellent. Like, that's the thing. Like, to me, when I talk about Warhammer Fest, do I want them to take over a massive convention centre in Manchester and put on a humongous tournament for AOS, 40k, Blood Bowl, whatever they were doing there? It was huge. They had, like, laser tag and all this kind of stuff. They went big, right? But the problem is almost like that kind of scale is almost unnecessary. What I miss and what I would love to see again is like the intimacy and the fun that was, Warhammer Fest 2019. Like, in a way, it's funny, right? Because I've said it before and I haven't gone back and checked, but my guess is we were probably quite critical of Warhammer Fest 2019.
Yeah.
Well, do I remember, what year was it where we were surrounded by armed gunmen? Was that 2017 or 2018? There was a weird year where
2018 maybe. There was lots of police around.
Well, there was like an unfortunate terrorist incident, wasn't there, in like Manchester at like the
arena,
a concert.
Yeah.
And then I think at that point everything was on like high alert, so any event was being like patrolled by armed police officers.
Yeah.
And it was the maddest thing, because again, I've probably told the story before, but it was the maddest thing because we're just there playing games and there were like armed police officers like watching the games, having chats with you. And it's it's a weird scenario to be playing Warhammer while having a chat with a man wielding an armed rifle. It's like, it creates a very different sort of like, optics to the whole thing. But anyway, yeah, but that's the thing. I think 2018, bar the people walking around with rifles, was a really, really good one. I think that was the one where... Was that the Adeptus Titanicus one, 2018?
I think so, but I'm probably merging all my memories into one, so I'm not sure. I mean, it was there one year, because I remember we saw the
It was there one year. It was there one year.
The Forge World tiles were there, and that's when we spoke to James Hewitt. And
yes,
you accosted him about was it Seventh Ed Elder Codex as well?
Well, he kind of offered that stuff voluntarily. I was just interested to hear more once he sort of opened up about it. But yeah, look, to that point, like, I think that's the thing. I'm not saying that Warhammer Fest needs to come back like it was in 2023. I think it needs to come back like it was in, the latter half of the 2010s. I think that was super fun. I really enjoyed all those Warhammer Fests, and I'd love to see him return to that, because I think they're great.
Here's the thing. Can it be as good? Because we have so many reveal shows now throughout the year, it feels like Games Workshop would have to either hold back a lot of stuff. Because what was really interesting in those previous ones was you see that, especially Forge World, you got to see all of their like sort of prototypes, stuff they're working on, sometimes like years in advance of, and sometimes some things like the Deredeo shielding unit never saw the light of day as a model, but it was very cool that you got to see like cool previews there. Plus, you obviously got to speak to the staff, and obviously that might be a point of contention that Games Workshop doesn't want to cross and go back to, because they want to keep staff either secluded away or, for them to not be personalities, whatever reason they have. Like, that they clearly had a reason last time, and we've said that's the wrong one, because actually getting to interact with them is great, and it probably for the staff members is something that they want to do as well, to actually speak to the fans of the products that they're involved in.
My guess is they've got a stock price exceeding however many hundreds of pounds now, whatever it is that their individual unit cost is on a GW stock, and once you get that valuable, you become way more conscientious about the communications coming out of your company, because obviously these things create, variables, and variables create, either wealth or ruin. And I think that's probably where they kind of landed with it, is probably a mandate to try and protect a share price more than any other kind of objective, which is a shame.
Good point. Yeah, that could be true. But
again, I mean, I may be putting two and two together and making some obscene number, but I think that's it. Who knows? Who knows what the deal was? I think they just also if you remember, 2023 was the only hands kind of period of GW as well, wasn't it? They really kind of clamped down on personalities because they just lost Louise.
Yeah, she had gone.
They just lost Peachy as well. And obviously they were still reeling after the Duncan Rhodes, occurrence, and him going off and obviously becoming a very successful influencer in his own right. So I think that's the thing. I think they probably, as much as it would be good to point towards share prices, it's probably more just out of a act of defiance against their staff gaining that kind of notoriety again.
Quite possibly. I mean, they do a much better job of that stuff now. Their YouTube channel is quite interesting, and it's more like YouTuber content where they do like little challenges and stuff in addition to like painting guides and stuff like that. So, they put on a decent amount of content, and I think maybe now their plan is to, rather than just having one or two presenters, it's probably like 3, 4, 5 maybe. Like feels like they've introduced more, so no one in particular is gonna have enough sort of celebrity kudos like a Peachy or Duncan or a Louise to then go off and do their own thing. Although they probably still could, for sure, especially if it's newer people coming up and watching that content.
Yeah, I think the thing is like, Duncan Rhodes and I think Peachy and Louise benefited massively from the period of time when they kind of were given more of a platform, which was the COVID era, right? Like they were more prevalent during COVID, and people were consuming more of their content. So I think Peachy and Louise benefited massively from that. Although Peachy was kind of early doors Warhammer community painting stuff as well. I say early doors, earlier than some. So I think those two benefit from that stuff. Obviously, Rob massively benefited from being on the live streams from the get-go and doing that stuff, and then obviously parting ways with them and creating Honest Wargamer. But yeah, Duncan really stands out because I think the thing about Duncan was he was like the chosen one, he was the special boy because he was so significant. Because again, Rob, Louise, Peachy, none of them exist without what Duncan did. And the thing is again, seeing it through the lens of the time period. I mean, Duncan started producing videos for Warhammer YouTube more than 10 years ago now. I feel like his first video came out in like 2013, 2014. And I think it was a real marked turning point in the business as they were starting to embrace social media again. And I think this is the thing. It's like, it's so mad to say that because the internet today is such a different animal to what it was 12 years ago.
Yeah. It was one of the like kind of consistent people putting out, well, I say him, Games Workshop was one of the consistent channels putting out like pretty decent painting tutorials. Obviously it benefits from they're putting stuff out in association and at the same time with the release of their miniatures, which whereas now we live in a world where loads of people do painting tutorials on YouTube. Some of them are for free. A lot of them, have Patreons. There's like world-class painters that you can follow on there and, pay for their, to watch the stuff they're doing. So the market share is so much watered down in comparison to what it was back then, where there were so few people doing it to that sort of level of professionalism.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? Right now, we've gotten to a point where, you know, the presenters of current day Warhammer, a TV, YouTube content stuff, they just don't feel as special because like that stuff isn't that special anymore, right? I mean, to coin a really, really crass turn of phrase, and you'll probably ask me to bleep this one, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's just another penis on the internet, right? Like in the sense that now it's just gotten to the point where it's...
That does need bleeping for sure.
Oh, come on. Not that. That's not a swear.
Of course it is.
I mean, that is a perfect... You could whatever, I'll bleep it anyway, but people knew what I was saying. But you know what I mean, right? Like it has gotten to that point.
That's the thing. There's just so many people doing it. And often
exactly.
As good, if not better, like quality of content. And so I think it just, the time period, I think, does factor into, when people like Louise and Duncan and Peachy were sort of significant. And I don't think, I mean, here's the thing. If the people that are doing the current painting stuff on Warhammer, is it Warhammer TV or Warhammer YouTube channel? Right?
Well, Warhammer YouTube, Warhammer Community, I think they call them. Yeah.
So if those people who end up doing it for, say, like 10 years, like really long time, I think there'll be a group of fans of theirs that kind of grew up on it. Whereas, especially if you're younger, because that's probably the target demographic they're going for in a lot of those videos. Whereas for us, it's sort of like we've moved beyond that, and it's like, I'll occasionally watch one, but I'm not. I don't think I've ever recently sat down and actually watched it. Like I've sort of had it on in the background, maybe, or I've sort of time jumped through one just to see what they're working on, and see if it's anything interesting. But I feel like we're not that target audience anymore. So there might be a crowd for them, but I don't think it will be for a while. I think they've got to put the years in almost to sort of build up that fan base for that person in particular, I think.
That's fair. And I do agree with you on that front also. I think, some of these...
do you know what any of them are called? Can you remember any of their names? Like, I don't.
There is Blue Hair Lady.
Occasionally, yeah.
Occasionally Blue Haired Lady.
I think, is she Emma, maybe? I don't, but again, I don't know.
Yeah, there's that one. And then there's like the main one now who speaks with a very elegant voice. He's sort of like, I can't even do the voice. It's And then there's the guy that used to work at the Warhammer Worlds, but I forget his name too.
The one with like short hair, like shaved short hair.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think they've all got short hair, mate. I think none of them have got especially crazy long hair.
A buzz cut sort of thing.
No, I don't think he had a buzz cut. I think he has like a mustache and curly hair.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking of a different person there.
Exactly. I have no idea either, mate. But look, but again, despite the fact that their names have not been learnt, their content is good. I will say that for the Warhammer TV YouTube channel, they've definitely stepped up their game. And I watched their stuff. Like I watched the one where the guy painted a load of goblins in like 500 minutes or whatever it was. I think it was 500 minis in 500 minutes or something.
I watched one like that. It might not have been that exact one, but I've seen a few where like the three of them do like a challenge and they're each like painting something up. Like that was quite interesting. Like, yeah,
they did like a blind box one where one of them ended up with a big.
Did one of them have like? Was that the one with the knights? Because one of them they were trying to do like unique armies in under a time period.
Yeah. Anyway, the point is I've enjoyed a great many of their things. I think they do good work. Credit where credit's due to them.
Yeah. I think it's proved the point that Games Workshop, by having multiple presenters, has done its job. Because if there was only one of them, I bet we would have all remembered their name. But because there's several of them, I don't know whoever they are.
I've gone I've gone onto their channel just to kind of see. I mean, they're doing all right views. I mean, nothing like what I suppose Duncan used to do back in the day, but still consistently good. I mean, many thousands of views. So yeah, they're obviously getting the audience for what it is. So yeah, good on them. Again, I like it, but I think that's the thing. I think the problem is more and more now, this stuff just isn't that special anymore. I think back in, because again, back through the lens of 12 years ago, like a lot of people were doing bat rep content. Yeah, people like Winters. You still had obviously Tabletop Tactics, but yeah, I suppose 40k online content was a lot more niche back then, and the fact that GW were doing these high production things made a difference. Whereas, I guess these days the hobby has become slightly more mature in terms of its media content, etc. And yeah, good on them. Good on them. I hope they can do well. I mean, it's weird, isn't it? It's like there are people who were also part of like early Games Workshop streamy content stuff who I feel like probably wouldn't have a huge amount of success if they broke up and did it on their own. But I won't be so rude as to name names, but I feel like there's those that, rightly have moved on to do other things, and those that might struggle if they tried to do the same. But who knows for sure? Who knows?
True.
But yes, there's all that. What else is going on in the general sense at the minute? Yeah, obviously, yeah. So as you said, Phil, we got the chapter approved stuff going around the corner. We're under the impression that the Horus Heresy will have a reveal by the time this episode goes out, and we'll have a chance to record something about that. So we're not talking about Horus Heresy in the outro on the basis that Horus Heresy will have been spoken about in the episode. Did you buy the terrain pieces for your Nighthawk?
No, I haven't. I probably should. I sort of forgot, and then I was like, no, I'm not bothered, and I was like, it's quite expensive. But I will.
How much is it?
I'm going to guess £40.
£40?
I don't actually know. Look.
I suppose on a related note, if we're going to talk about Age of Sigmar stuff again for a moment, and again, I think we talked about this in the last episode.
It's not £40, it's £50. Scandalous. I mean, that is Games Workshop prices.
That's Games Workshop prices, and you're going to get 3 pieces of terrain.
And I believe they're quite big. I've seen people say, oh no, they're the same size as the old Mausoleum kit, but then I've seen photos and they look almost double in size. They look quite chunky.
Did you see... yeah, they do actually look quite chunky. Sorry, I was just looking at an image of them now. Yeah, God, they're actually quite big. Yeah, they're big boys.
Yeah.
And, you can make them into 2 different variant kits, Phil. I mean, not dramatically different from each other, admittedly, but they are 2 different things,
Technically, sort of. Not that you can make them into 2 separate things. You've got to pick a side, quite literally, with the walls and flip them over.
Magnets, Phil. Magnets.
No, I think it'll be fine just to stick with my preferred side and just live with that for if and when I get my Soulblight Grave Lords finished, I'll run them for that, but also predominantly run them for my Nighthawk.
Question, Phil, though, if you are in the market for pre-ordering, are you buying more Soulblight Grave Lords dice?
No, because I've got enough now. I managed to, I think it was like on eBay, I managed to get another set relatively cheaply.
Oh, okay.
Because I sort of felt like, so I own 3 sets in total. The first set, half of the dice, so at least it was like 10 or so of because it's 16, you get 10 or so got stolen from Warhammer World when I was at an event, and that was literally the first time I took them there, so it was a bit annoying. Then
I'm convinced it was that guy who had the exact same dice who then pretended that he didn't take them.
I mean, Possibly.
I'm convinced. I don't want to be that guy, but I'm convinced that's where they went.
mean, that seems like the most logical thing, and potentially taken in error, or maybe he thought I.
100% in error. 100% error.
But I did politely ask him, because it was one of those things where I was rolling the dice, and then I realised he had the same dice, but neither of us had like spare dice or whatever, so we had to do with that, and we tried to keep them separate. And yeah,
that's fair. Maybe I was being unfair to the guy, because he was actually. Yeah, you're right. In retrospect, he was quite helpful about it, wasn't he? But that was the game that you lost them in.
Yes, no, it was. Yeah, so that was.
So after, it seems
it was also during lunch as well. So we had our game. So it would have been the morning game. Then we broke for lunch. Then I went to the next game and was counting out my dice and going, "Where's all my dice gone?" Then I asked him, and he was in the middle of his game, and I eventually got to ask him, and he said he'd check, and then eventually he said, "Oh no, I don't have them." So I trusted him that he was being honest, but who knows? But my point is, I then bought a second set of dice, which brought probably my total up to 20 something, but not enough for the actual numbers of dice I actually need to roll for like a horde of Nighthaunt charging in. So then I managed to buy a third set on cheap. So now I've got too many, but I've got more than enough for what I actually need to roll. More than I can fit in two hands, because they're the big dice.
That's fair. That's fair. I had two topics I wanted to talk about in this outro. One of them was going to be Age of Sigmar related, but I think I'm going to skip that. So actually, no, sorry, I had three. Because I was going to go on a diatribe about some of the Scourge of Garan stuff, but maybe, depending on how the next couple of weeks go, that will have become a segment of its own, because I think it'd be good to do an Age of Sigmar wrap-up on that, so fine, that'll be a segment in itself. So the first of the topics is how terrible, and I know we kind of talked about this before, but now I can talk more freely about it, how terrible those robots are for Thousand Suns. I think they're the worst minis Games Workshop has ever made relative to its release. Like, I can't think of a model that has fumbled harder than the Thousand Sun robot.
Come down. The Space Marine ATV, obviously. The Desolation Marines.
I think these are worse than both. I think this is worse than both.
Oh.
I think this is by far and away the most disappointing, like, awful miniature ever made. And I think I think relative to its release, because I think at least as well, when it came to the ATV, for example, or the T-shirt cannon guns, as they were called, the Desolation Marines, I think, yes, okay, fair enough, they were bad minis, but they delivered to their expectations, right? Like, when you bought the ATV, you got an ATV. Sure, it had no bottom, because it was all moulded details, and sure, the guy in the back had very weird, or maybe it was the guy in the front. Whatever the case was, it seemed a bit anatomically incorrect.
Yes.
But ultimately, when you put it down on the tabletop, it looks like a very, very low to the ground ATV, right? Like, it's a weird design that makes no sense. It needs more weight or height, I suppose. But ultimately, Primaris Marine design is inherently cool, and the ATV isn't good, but it's passable. The same thing with the Desolation Marines. Desolation Marines by themselves, the weapon is dumb, but the Primaris Marine is a cool mini. So the overall effect is dumb weapon on a cool sculpt. And they had some interesting bits in it. I don't know. I can forgive those two, even though I don't like them. I think this robot thing, what's it actually called? Sorry.
Sekitar?
Is it Sekitar? Where are they? God, where are they? Don't tell me they've actually sold out. That would be crazy. People have actually bought this miserable looking thing. Oh, it's not even listed.
It's probably because it's sold out on the bottom then.
No, you can only buy it through the Thousand Suns Battle Force.
Of course, yeah.
And you get 4 of them, and when you look at them amongst the Thousand Suns Battle Force, what you realise is that they're barely bigger than the Terminator kit. Bearing in mind that the Thousand Sun Terminator kit is a smaller Terminator kit than modern Terminator kits. It's just, Oh, it's so bad.
But it is what it's like saying with the ATV. It's a dumb car, but that's exactly what you get. This is a sort of slightly dumb looking robot, but I feel like that's what you got. Here's the thing: the better argument to say is that the ATV and the Desolation Marines were released in a sea of other fresh Space Marine releases that you can pick and choose from. So there's enough of a model range within Space Marines that you can choose to ignore them. Whereas with this is this is like the oasis in the desert for Thousand Suns, because you have not had a new unit added to your army pretty much since forever. And then if you don't like it, you feel a bit scuppered. I personally don't mind them. I've yet to see them in person, so I might hate them. I might change my opinion. Normally,
when you see them in person, I think you'll understand why they're so bad.
I think,
mate, they are tiny.
I think they could probably do with being a bit bigger and because I saw a picture of them next to, was it Wraith Guards? So they feel scaled correctly to Wraith Guards, and maybe that's why they're that sort of size. They're like construct size, but they do feel like they should have really been a fair bit taller. To me, I just look at them and it just reminds me of Stargate, and that's probably a deliberate comparison or a unintended one, because they're both cribbing off of Egyptian culture, right? So could they have done it in a way where it just didn't feel Stargatey? I don't know.
Yeah, I just think they're really bad sculpts, mate. And I think, I don't know, whatever. If again, wait till you see them. But I'm not keen. The other thing I was going to talk about and wanted to get your opinion on is, and I suppose this will be our closing topic because we've been now talking for an hour. An interesting thing has occurred, Phil, and I know we don't normally talk about leaks on the podcast because we tend to try and kind of avoid them, but the Space Wolves Codex has leaked, hasn't it? This is a fact.
I'm aware that it has leaked. I've just not clicked on the pictures to look at them. Other than I saw that people were commenting on how awful the photos actually were and joking about what cameras these are taken on.
Yeah, that is fair. But anyway, the thing, and again, bear in mind, by the time this episode will have come out, people will have put their reviews up of the Codex, because those on the Influencer program will have already received it and will already be giving their opinion. So we're not saying anything that's not exactly. But the thing that's super interesting to me, Phil, and the thing I wanted to talk to you about is, if I am not incorrect, and I don't believe myself to be, we are now seeing the first ever Primaris Space Marine discontinued.
Oh.
It's happened.
Is it the... wait, it's got to be one of two things.
Mm-hmm.
Is it an actual model?
Yeah, well, I mean, in so much as they're a squad.
So it's the Hounds of Morkai?
Yes.
Oh. Fun fact, I know someone that actually plays Hounds of Morkai.
No, you
Yes,
don't.
told me about it. So a guy called Ian, who goes to No Retreat, he's a lovely chap. He's got a huge, I believe, commission-painted Spaceballs army, and as Toad reminded me, he runs Hounds of Morkai, isn't it?
Well, reading the leaks, and I've read a couple, I've looked at a couple of different versions of the leaks. They're not in there that I can see. Now, there's always a possibility that they've not been photographed. So
yeah.
They've been left out of the photography. Maybe people were like, who cares about Hounds of Morkai?
Exactly, yeah. I can imagine that happening.
Yeah, but you know the thing that's interesting about the Hounds of Morkai being discontinued from Warhammer 40,000 is they're actually the first and for a long time only specialist Primaris Space Marine unit
they were, yeah.
in the game.
Yeah.
So they were so technically the Victrix Honor Guard were the first.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Victrix Honor Guard...
Came with Minus Vanguard.
Yeah. They came with Marneus Calgar, but they themselves were a squad.
Yeah.
And they could be taken in any Ultramarines army and protect any hero.
That's
they
true.
Didn't have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I used to run them with Bobby G.
I converted some up for my Minotaurs. They're terrible sculpts. I don't like them.
Oh, I thought you said your conversions were.
Well, I basically...
Oh, well, that was very modest
I
of you.
basically stopped halfway through my conversions of them because I just wasn't happy with how they looked, and that was actually down to
Oh, so you were trying to convert them?
Yeah, so I was converting them into Honor Guard for basically just giving them shields, but keeping... And like maybe I would have done like a helmet swap and stuff like that. But yeah, and gave them spears. That was it. Spears and shields, very, very Spartan-esque vibes, but the weird they're sort of squatting but like leaning forwards. With the legs was very odd on those.
Yeah, they're very two-dimensional, which is odd because again, a lot of cape, and then they're very kind of they're almost flat.
Yes, they are. They're very flat.
Which is weird. The shield sort of rounds them out a bit more, and the helmets are nice, but I think on the whole they're not the greatest. But weirdly, so the Victor's Honor Guard technically were the first, although because they were kind of really only actually sold with Calgar, I choose to discount them because one, it supports this argument, but also because I feel like it's correct because of how they were sort of sold. But the Hounds of Mordecai throughout all of 8th edition and all of 9th edition up until the release of Black Templars were basically the only specialist Primaris Space Marine squad. Chapter-specific Primaris Space Marine squad. No others existed until Crusade squads. Like, literally, Crusade squads were the first to come along after the fact, and then the Sword Brethren. And then we entered into 9th edition, where all of a sudden Space Marine chapters started having units. Because it is a modern phenomenon, like literally.
Well, when did the Blood Angels get their Death Company? Because that was a spin scheme.
Yes,
I think that was after.
That was
I think before Black Templars, but after Ultramarines.
Yeah, well, you might be right, actually. Maybe Primaris Death Company came before them. There's an interesting thing to remember. But anyway, whatever the case, whether they were the first, the second, or the third, they were certainly one of the few that existed early doors, and now they're gone, it seems.
It would be a shame. However, it feels like they've already got quite a healthy roster of unique units.
Oh, totally.
It's not like they're short, and they're going to have like their own scouts, and Reavers are scout-esque. So I can sort of see why they might go, well, they don't really feel particularly unique anymore, especially when everything else is getting custom sculpts. Now, if they turned around and go, well, actually, we're going to save Hounds of Mordecai, we're going to redo them and give them like unique sculpts and not just be a paint job, I think that would actually be a better way of doing it, because then it's not invalidating people's units. It's then making it actually a genuinely interesting, visual unit that isn't just Reavers with a different coloured shoulder pad or whatever it is they have to mark them out being slightly different.
Yeah, I mean, what's crazy interesting is the fact that they did keep the Dreadnought kits, which again is a bit of a weird one, because it's like, if you're keeping the Dreadnought kits, why did you get rid of the Blood Angels ones? But fine.
Is it because they can't get rid of Bjorn the Fell-Handed without... It's like if you get rid of the regular Dreadnoughts, but then you keep Bjorn in, that feels weird. So maybe they're gone, well, let's just keep them.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And I think, Bjorn... And obviously, we posed the idea that they could have just put Bjorn into a Redemptor, but someone actually in our comments pointed this out to us, which was they said that, and I looked into it after the fact, that the problem is with the Redemptor is that it is so high stress it basically melts the
burns them out. Yeah, I do remember hearing that ages ago. But it doesn't mean you can't. I mean, here's the thing: you could fudge it as a law reason, or
of course,
or do a
you
new,
could just be
new
like
variant or something.
Yeah, this one has an untwistable stomach. It's unkillable for whatever arbitrary reason. But yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's interesting to. Anyway, the only reason I think it's interesting is because this is the other thing I think that we're about to see in 11th edition, bringing it full circle. Is I think when we start to get to the 11th edition of 40k, I think it could be interesting to see what, if any, Primaris units survive that process, because now are we at that point where, because of the sheer volume of Primaris that's been done over the last, will be soon 9 years, will they get to a point where they're like, now it's time to update the Intercessors, now it's time to update the Hellblasters, now it's time to update the Inceptors, and just be aggressors, reavers, whatever they are. Are we going to see those guys?
If you want to redo the Desolation Marines and ATV, knock yourself out. I think everything. I mean, you could update some of the kits. I think the aggressors could be redone because they were like an easy build kit.
No, aggressors have normal kits as well.
Oh god, you're right. But sorry, they had the sort of old style Gravis armor with the sort of fondly called the belly plate, much like the old captain. But I think the new captain doesn't have that anymore. So he matches more the heavy intercessors with their Gravis armor, which is slightly different. They basically got a belt, whereas the aggressors have tassels and slightly different sort of chest piece. So, they could change those to be more in line with the other kits, but I don't think that's a problem. I mean, if anything, I could imagine they might just get rid of some of those like original Primaris lieutenants, which, I mean, I don't know if they even still sell them or not.
No, they've mostly... All of those old lieutenants are pretty much gone, yeah. But they've all been replaced by the one-size-fits-all kit now.
Okay. So. See, I suspect we'd get the vehicles going, or something would happen with them, like the Rhinos and Land Raiders getting either redone and Primarisified, or like the Drop Pod, which we haven't really talked about too much, which just seems like a like-for-like update. And then they're not changing it, so they might go, cool, here's a Rhino again, but then what's the point of the Impulsor when you've got a Rhino?
Well, that's it, right? I mean, I'd love to see them do a new Rhino kit. They won't, but I mean, and they obviously have done for Heresy anyway, but yeah, I think it's going to be interesting on that front. But anyway, there you go, that was my little rambles. Did you have anything you wanted to talk about, Phil, or should we wrap up episode 205?
I can give a quick update on my shed that I'm working away on still.
I'm sure people will be thrilled to know more about your shed scenario. Do tell.
Exactly. I'm on the shed is built. I can't remember if it was. It wouldn't have been built last time. I've spent.
It was built last time. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm still working on the flooring. Then it's that's coming on.
Fine.
But I will get the flooring.
Has your dad come round to work you like a dog again?
No. He's had the week off. It's just me working myself. So, yeah, the flooring will get finished tomorrow.
Very nice. Very nice.
Then there's still more to do, because I think I'm going to do some proper insulation on the inside.
Mate, you should.
Well, it's really already got flooring and roof insulation, so it's just walls. But the walls are quite thick. Obviously, just made of wood, though, but they could do some proper insulation. So I might do that and put some nicer flooring down, or some, I don't know, like some kind of covering on top of the wooden flooring, because some of those floorboards were a bit wonky.
Yeah, it's good when you get like proper flooring in, to be fair. I think that'll probably help sort of give it the je ne sais quoi. I think that's a good thing to aim for. So yeah, I think that would definitely take it up a notch. Get some insulation in as well. I mean, that's what I've got with my one out here. Although mine's more of a summer house, if you will, but yeah, it certainly works wonders for me, mate. So I highly recommend.
Oh yeah, but yeah, that's the thing. I think it'll be worth the effort, even if it means I'm not moving into my shed quite as soon as I'd like.
Well, you seem to have settled into an okay groove with it. Although I imagine you feel the loss. Although I guess you're still working in the shed. You're just working on it, in it, around it.
Yes, yeah. I'm just not hobbying at the moment.
No. But this is the thing, mate. You're investing in future greatness. You know.
Exactly. Yeah, that is true.
Imagine how awesome that black coach is going to look once you've done all this.
Yeah. See, the worry is that I won't have enough time to get it painted up for the event. But at least I can just paint it up anyway because it's now good.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, again, who knows what's coming around the corner with
the actual Codex Battle Tome.
Well, or the Battle Tome or the GHB as well. I think that's going to be massively influential on that side of things. So, yeah, I'm sure you're...
there's a lot of stuff to buy. I've got the Mausoleums, which I talked about before. I've got the General's Handbook, which will probably be quite expensive because it's going to come with objective markers. Then there's the Not Pariah Nexus update, the 40k chapter approved deck of cards.
Yeah.
Lots of stuff to spend money on. And that's not even models.
We need to buy Codex Thousand Suns as well.
We need to also do that, yeah. That's on pre-order already, isn't it? So we should put that one in.
Yeah, we should get that done. Indeed. All right, mate. Well, anyway, there we go. That was episode 205. Thank you very much for everyone for listening. We always appreciate it. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully we did too. We don't know yet, but that bit was nice. So, yeah. Cheers, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye now.